Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Several hours passed quickly. Chen Ming had already left the captain's room. Chen Ming was still lying on the sofa with his eyes closed. After agreeing to help the president a few days ago, he had already begun to distract himself to help the president do things. He had to deal with all the galaxies in a star field that were highly suspected of dimensional infection. Although he had the Yuhui core to assist him in doing these things, he didn't need to really look at every place, but he still had to be responsible for the tasks assigned to the Yuhui core and the docking tasks with the people from the 5th Legion, which still required him to spend a certain amount of time and energy. It just so happened that Enwuping had not encountered any problems in the past few days, except that he had to follow Zwajing like a mouse and constantly change spaceships. In addition, before, it took him a week to go to Kayamo openly. Now this situation of running around with Zwajing will only be slower and less efficient. So Chen Ming planned to reduce the attention assigned to Enwuping appropriately, spend less time thinking, and do more other things. For example, put it in the 14th Legion's prosthesis to study the catalytic core that was sent over in the past 2 days. Chen Ming feels that this thing is very interesting. After using it, it can produce some unique special compounds that may not be produced with the current level of technology. Depending on the external conditions in the experiment, the compounds produced by the catalytic core have a variety of properties. Chen Ming can see the potential of this thing from these numerous compounds, so he is now mainly studying the properties of these things. However, Chen Ming's idea was not realized. Because Enwuping didn't stay at peace for long, Chen Ming, who had left, suddenly returned to the captain's room and said to Chen Ming, "Can you help me?" Chen Ming opened his eyes. "What?" Chen Ming took out a few colorful glass beads emitting psychic fluctuations from his pocket and said, "Take a look at these." "I see. Then what?" "You should have seen it, right? My psychic power can replicate other people's abilities. These glass beads are the embodiment of the replicated psychic power. You only need to inject a small amount of psychic fluctuations and then crush them, and you can treat other people's psychic power as your own psychic power and control it with mental power. The black fog before was the ability I copied from other people." Chen Ming's face was calm, and he asked, "So what?" "So I want to use other people's psychic power to exchange for some of your psychic energy." To be honest, Chen Ming was a little tempted. After all, the psychic energy fluctuation effects of these glass beads looked very interesting, but he still refused, not interested. These glass beads are all derivatives of your psychic energy. You have absolute control over these things. It should not be difficult to recycle them. I don't want to exchange for something without any guarantee, not to mention that the effect may not be good. Chen Ming shrugged and said, "Even if I say that I can't affect the things I give out as long as they are not within the range of my psychic energy fluctuation, you probably won't believe it." He thought Chen Ming's answer was normal. No psychic would want his psychic energy to be stolen by others. After all, psychic energy is the foundation of psychic energy. If someone studies it thoroughly and specifically targets it, it is easy to get into trouble. It always takes time for people to accept his psychic energy with a replica effect. At least he just saw a hint of excitement on Enwuping's face. After a while, Enwuping will understand what value his psychic energy has. Besides, it is not necessary to exchange psychic energy with Enwuping. As long as Enwuping is by his side when he uses his psychic energy, the escaping psychic energy fluctuations can also be transformed into the heart-gathering spirit beads. There is no need to rush. However, he came back to the captain's room not only to obtain Enwuping's psychic energy, but also to find out what happened in the space station and laboratory that Enwuping had visited. They had sent out 5 psychics before, and the only one who came back alive was quite vague when he spoke, and disappeared after discovering that the top management had doubts about him, and he has not been found yet. How about this? Chen Ming put a handful of glass beads on the coffee table in front of Chen Ming and said, "I will use these things to buy intelligence from you. I want to know what you did there and what happened there. Not to investigate you, just pure curiosity. Look, 3 cruisers outside were sunk by you, and a space station was blown up because of you, but we haven't investigated yet, right?" Chen Ming glanced at the front and said, "You blew up the space station yourself, and aren't you well informed? The government can intervene. Don't you know what happened on the space station? What happened in the laboratory, don't you know? There are always people who deceive their superiors and subordinates, so we need some side evidence. Chimyon picked up a glass bead, flicked it on the coffee table a few times, and said, one piece of information in exchange for a heart-gathering spirit bead. Seeing that Whooping seemed to have no interest, he immediately added, a simple question you asked. At this point, Chen Ming finally perked up a little and asked, how can you guarantee that what you said is true? I can't guarantee it. Even if I guarantee it, you won't believe it. So I said it's a simple question. You are our partner now, and I also hope that you can continue to stay in the future. As long as it doesn't involve our fundamental interests, there is no need for me to lie, right? Chen Ming sat up straight and asked, what do you want to ask? Let's start with a simple one and build initial trust between us. Did you destroy our underground laboratory? I did. Chen Ming decisively admitted this. Chimyon also pointed to the glass beads on the table and said, which one do you want? There are about 20 glass beads on the table, with a total of more than a dozen different types of spiritual energy fluctuations. What abilities do these have? You'll know after you feel them. The psychic energy fluctuations of the dozen or so heart-gathering spiritual beads on the coffee table were very weak, so there was no conflict between them, but it did interfere with Chen Ming's choice. In addition to roughly sensing the type, there was no way to figure out the specific effect and strength. However, the psychic energy fluctuation intensity of one of these red and blue glass beads was obviously much higher than that of the other glass beads. This was the entropy control heart-gathering spiritual bead left by Hu Yi. I just don't know whether it was left by Hu Yi on his own initiative or was passively taken away by Chimyon. Chen Ming himself had a black mist and an entropy control of Hu Yi, and he was definitely more interested in the others than what he already had. However, after a rational analysis, he still chose black mist. After all, if this thing is used well, it is indeed a top psychic energy that combines attack, survival, and displacement. Chimyon showed a look of as expected on his face, motioning and whooping to ask questions. Chen Ming thought for a moment and then asked Chimyon, what are you doing in Kamo Star region? This is not a simple question. Of course it is not a simple question. Because Chen Ming can be sure that what is happening in Kamo Star region is definitely not just dimensional infection, but Zhuojing is trying to use dimensional infection and has achieved certain results. This is the basis for his discovery that Zhuojing has conducted dimensional infection experiments, no doubt. Is it some kind of object related to dimensional infection? Or someone related to dimensional infection? Or is it pure research data? It is not clear at present. So the key that Chen Ming wants to figure out now is what Zhuojing has done with dimensional infection. Why didn't Zhuojing leave with their results? Instead, he is still in Kamo Star region, even though Kamo has been completely surrounded by the 5th Legion, and he still doesn't leave as if he wants to strangle them. He also sent a large number of psychics belonging to Zhuojing into Kamo. Zhuojing has always been a cult that cannot be put on the stage, although they have never been killed, and they are still disgusting the Empire in various places. But they don't have the possibility to fight the Empire in one star field for a lifetime, let alone a star field in the heart of the Empire. So Chen Ming thinks that there is a high possibility that there is something in Kamo Star Field that requires Zhuojing to persist for a period of time to complete, and it is a task related to dimensional infection. They must persist for a period of time before they can leave with this thing. Otherwise, it cannot explain why they changed their previous style of hiding and chose to clash with Kamo and the Empire. Although there is no actual fighting at present, given the current situation, it is only a matter of time before a large-scale conflict between psychics occurs. So, what Zhuojing is protecting now is the key to Zhuojing's plan and the key that Chen Ming needs to destroy. Chen Ming certainly knows that this is not a simple question. But he has to pretend to be stupid and ask a question. Maybe he will tell it? It's a pity that Chimyon is not fooled. Then Chen Ming didn't continue to dwell on this issue. Anyway, he already has a general idea, and he will definitely keep these guesses in his stomach. There is no benefit in saying it out of his mind except unnecessary vigilance. Just continue to ask other questions. So Chen Ming stared at Chimyon for a few seconds and asked another question. How are the resources used by the psychics in your Zhuojing distributed? How do you obtain them? Oh, temporary cooperation is also interested in those of us who have to join for a long time to obtain them? What? Do you have an idea? Just asking. Chimyon smiled and said, "We will regularly arrange tasks for the bases in different star fields. When the tasks are completed, we will reward the bases and the psychics who perform the tasks. That's it. What people who do the tasks can get is fixed. The extra things distributed to the bases should be considered as funds. How much the people in the bases can get depends on their ability." Chen Ming has already imagined a scene where the psychics in the Zhuijing base fight each other for some materials that have no reasonable distribution plan at all. Are you really not afraid of destroying the entire base? If they are destroyed, it means they are all useless. Just find more. The world is not short of people who can't control their desires after having a little ability. Such people are our potential members. By the way, what I just said is for our ordinary psychics. If it's you, as long as we can confirm that you really want to join us for a long time, then your ability is enough for us to train you specifically. You are worthy of our training, just like we give you important medicines. Chen Ming said with some disdain, "Medicine is the basis of cooperation. I work for you, and you give me medicine. It has nothing to do with whether you train me or not. The relationship, don't pull things that you don't want to do on the relationship. It's a pity that the people over there are very scared." The tone of the words is difficult to understand. Just to say that there are horrible monsters in the laboratory, this Chen Ming can directly say, "One of your spirituals has a variety of different spiritual things, and it becomes a monster together." I thought subconsciously. Follow Chen Ming's possibility of thinking about this thing. If they choose to cheat people because of the conflict, it can indeed induce the psychic in the laboratory to become a psychotic entity. And in Whooping's current performance seems to have the ability to at least solve the psychotic entity in the middle stage. No problem. After giving Chimyon time to think, Chen Ming spoke again. "Okay, it's my turn to ask." He has to think carefully about how to ask the second question. His purpose is not to really join Zhuijing, but to solve the trouble brought by Zhuijing. This question must be asked in accordance with his purpose. The first question can be asked something irrelevant to establish in Whooping's personality. But the following questions must be related to his purpose. How to ask, so as not to alert Chimyon and connect the topic with Kamo Star region. Chen Ming thought about the connection between Zhuijing, Kamo, Odin Star region space station, and underground laboratory in his mind. He suddenly thought of something that seemed unrelated to the Kamo Star domain at first glance, but was actually absolutely related. What is the Mind Beast project? Chimyon knew that Chen Ming must have come into contact with the Mind Beast leaked from the underground laboratory, so he didn't think too much and said directly, "Since you have been to the underground laboratory, you should probably have seen the mutual repulsion between dimensional infection and Mind Beasts, right? We need Mind Beasts to ensure safety when we conduct dimensional infection experiments. The Mind Beast project works on people. It makes people become beasts, and uses a controllable madness belonging to beasts to resist the madness from the unknown and belonging to another dimension." When Chen Ming heard this, a flash of inspiration suddenly flashed in his mind. This is what he wanted to hear. Chimyon finally gave another valuable information. Chen Ming didn't rush to think about the overall logic, but argued, "But I only see the threat of this thing, and I don't think that this kind of thing that can be swallowed by the monster can prevent dimensional infection. You have to believe the results of our long-term experiments. Our use of this thing is much more perfect than you think." As Chimyon's words fell, Chen Ming's thoughts began to surge in his mind. He actually discovered these days that Chimyon is a person who doesn't like to lie. It's just that he likes to tell half of the truth, and sometimes the misleading of half of the truth is more serious than pure lies. However, if Chen Ming himself knew the remaining half of the sentence, it would not be a problem. Chen Ming can connect what Chimyon said with the information he knows about Zhuijing and infer what Zhuijing is doing. The Mind Beast project can be used to protect people. However, the means to protect people from dimensional infection have already existed before, that is, to isolate them using materials that block psychic energy, a cheap, efficient, but dangerous means of protection. At first glance, there is no problem with the Mind Beast project being able to protect people. But Chen Ming knew the damage that the Mind Beast project would cause. Even a few days ago, Zhuo Jing had caused a large number of civilian casualties because of the Mind Beast project. So the results of this thing can never be mass-produced and can only work on a few people to protect a few people from the influence of dimensional infection. It is definitely not developed to protect the vast majority of Zhuo Jing, but to protect some key figures. This is the problem in Chen Ming's words. He was telling the truth, but the hidden content is the key. If you really believe his half of the words, you might miss the key point of the Mind Beast project, which is what Zhuo Jing is doing. Then, with such an understanding, starting from the earliest time, the earliest was Lu Wei. Such a person who was brainwashed by Zhuo Jing's psychic exploded and died in front of Chen Ming. Although he didn't know why Zhuo Jing wanted to kill Lu Wei in front of him, it was this death scene that made him discover that Zhuo Jing was carrying out dimensional infection. So dimensional infection is definitely inseparable from Zhuo Jing's brainwashed psychic, and brainwashed psychic is definitely a key figure in Zhuo Jing. Then this brainwashed psychic is likely to be a person who has experienced dimensional infection and is also a beneficiary of the Mind Beast project. The logic is smooth when you calculate it this way. Zhuo Jing's brainwashed psychic uses the Mind Beast to protect himself and uses dimensional infection to achieve his power. And it has also achieved initial results. Chen Ming has never seen any psychic whose psychic power can be used in a long distance and in such a large range and so unnoticed. You must know that for a normal psychic, the place where the psychic energy fluctuation acts is the place where the psychic energy can be realized. Except for himself. And the source of dimensional infection, that special dimension, does not completely correspond to the normal universe environment, but has 1,000 connections. It just meets the conditions for transferring psychic energy to every corner of the entire normal universe. Dimensional infection happens to take time to expand after it occurs. Then as a brainwashed psychic who wants to use dimensional infection to gain power, he naturally needs to stay here. The coordinates of dimensional infection are locked in this place, and he can't leave at will. Chen Ming still remembered the last recorded dimensional infection incident experienced by the president, and the sequelae of dimensional infection broke out half a year later. This means that Zhuo Jing may have started the dimensional infection experiment half a year ago, which just fits Chen Ming's statement that they had undergone a long experiment. At the same time, it can also explain why so many people in the empire were brainwashed by Zhuo Jing and secretly helped Zhuo Jing. Although Chen Ming still did not rule out the possibility that Chen Ming's words were false. But false words usually cannot explain things smoothly logically. So Chen Ming can think that this is the truth. It is no wonder that the president has not achieved any results in recent times. Obviously, a large number of people have been arranged to sweep the star field. Even if the number of people is not enough to sweep every corner, there should not be no substantial clues. If the source is a person, everything makes sense. People can move and run away in various places. When the dimensional infection is still breaking out and still acting on this person, another dimension can always locate him. That's why there are several places with 100% distortion rate in the president's investigation report. This is the reason. Find that person, kill that person, and the matter of Kayamo will be completely over. This is what Chen Ming will do next. Chen Ming has completely figured out the situation. Next, he only needs to follow Chen Ming into Kayamo, and maybe there will be a chance to directly contact the brainwashed psychic. No. It is only through Chen Ming that he can contact that person. The President and the Fifth Legion have not found the person for so long. It is very likely that it is not that the person hides too well, but that he has the ability to hide and disguise himself. The best way to contact that person is through Chen Ming. When the time comes, he can directly use psychic power to hold the brainwashed psychic and explode. The destruction brought by excessive plasma is fair to everyone. It is not a loss to exchange in whooping for an important person in Zhuo Jing. After Chen Ming thought about Zhuo Jing's matter thoroughly, he suddenly thought of himself. His psychic energy had long ago determined that it could easily transport things across hundreds or thousands of light years, and it only needed to consume a negligible amount of mental energy relative to this distance. Chen Ming had never figured out what it relied on before. It was obviously not the phase space, or something similar to the operating principle of the Stargate, because both of them require a lot of energy to activate. Now, when Chen Ming discovered the source of the power of Zhuo Jing's brainwashed psychic, which almost covered the empire, he finally had a more reasonable suspect. The dimension of the source of the dimensional infection. The psychic power of the brainwashed psychic will not bring things related to dimensional infection when using it. So it is normal that Chen Ming's psychic power will not bring dimensional infection when transporting things through that dimension. Of course, this is just a guess. Is it true? How does his psychic power work? Why can his control over enwhooping penetrate a closed environment made of silent alloy? These obviously need to be explained and need time to verify. And now Chen Ming still doesn't plan to think too much about his psychic power. He has to solve Zhuo Jing first. Chen Ming already had a clear idea in his mind. However, the communication with Chimyan was not over yet. After Chimyan answered Chen Ming's question, he pointed to the glass beads on the coffee table again and said, "Come on, choose one." Chen Ming hesitated a little when choosing this time. There are so many glass beads, and there is nothing to say about choosing black mist for the first time. Chimyan had just used it before, and the effect was very good. For the second choice, a normal person should choose the glass bead left by whose spiritual energy fluctuations were more obvious than the others. But Chen Ming is not a normal person. He already has several heart-gathering spirit beads in his hand. Chimyan can't doubt anything because of his choice of a glass bead. So Chen Ming's final choice was a heart-gathering spirit bead that exudes warm, spiritual energy fluctuations. After Chen Ming made his choice, Chimyan spoke again. Then the third question. Your psychic power is of the physical mutation type. What is the object of mutation? Seeing enwhooping frowning, Chimyan immediately added, "This question does involve some privacy, but you have to know that the object of the physical mutation type of psychic power will be manifested, and sooner or later it will be analyzed to find out what it is. You have to know this. This is not a completely private issue. But in exchange, you can ask questions first this time." Chimyan was right this time. The direction of mutation of a physical mutation type psychic can indeed be analyzed. Chen Ming just happened to have learned some knowledge about physical mutation type psychics recently. There is a very obvious gap between mutations with real prototypes and mutations without real prototypes. The mutation form of mutations with real prototypes will conform to the logic of biological existence in reality and should exist in reality. And the physical changes of physical mutation psychics without real prototypes will have an exaggerated extreme change, which is very iconic. So Chen Ming's carefully designed insect form based on the combination of thorn zerg and humans just fits this column with real prototypes. As long as the appearance of the thorn zerg and the plasma ability of the aurora wind spirit are analyzed a little, the results will come out. Chen Ming even knew that the Odin star region, which first contacted him, had analyzed the direction of his psychic mutation. But for Zhuo Jing, their main attention is now on the Camo star region. They don't have the ability and energy to investigate the appearance of countless species in the entire empire and their connection with Chen Ming's psychic energy. Although this is indeed not a very important issue, since it is related to enwhooping's disguise. Then Chen Ming still plans to follow Chimyan's initiative and decide whether to say it based on his next answer. If the information given is not enough, forget it. What else can Chimyan do to him? Then the question is, what questions should he ask Chimyan? At present, there is only one valuable question, and enough information has been asked. Asking more questions will not get anything new. So Chen Ming simply asked casually, "What benefits do you get from actively creating dimensional infection?" The harm caused by dimensional infection is very complicated. In short, you can treat it as a large-scale weapon that can also threaten the empire. Such a weapon is worth our research. But I also have some understanding of dimensional infection. It requires cloning technology, and all the materials required for cloning technology are blocked by the empire. Even the raw materials of weapons are blocked. Do your weapons really have deterrent power? Chen Ming once again acted as a nitpicker and questioned twice, trying to get more words from Chimyan's mouth. Whether it is deterrent or not depends not on what you think, but on what the empire thinks. Chimyan didn't say much, because this really involved what they were doing, and he couldn't say anything. And Chimyan knew that once this matter was over, or even before it was over, the empire had already begun to block the substitutes for the cloning experiment they found. Before finding a suitable new substitute, they really no longer had the ability to replicate the cloning experiment. Not to mention that the Empire would definitely increase its encirclement and suppression of them in the future. That's why they want to use the ability of dimensional infection to strengthen their psychics, at least to be able to manually create dimensional infection events. But this must not be said to Whooping, who has just joined. Chen Ming will definitely not accept Chimyun's answer. I am not satisfied with this answer. Chimyun said simply, then you can change the question. I have no objection. Okay. Chen Ming did not expect Chimyun to accept it so straightforwardly, and immediately thought of many questions he wanted to ask. Like, when can Zhuo Jing start the dimensional infection research? What other results are there in dimensional infection? And so on. However, Chen Ming felt that even if these questions were asked, the answers he could get from Chimyun would only be empty words and meaningless. Because the questions he wanted to ask were quite purposeful, Chimyun would definitely be very restrained, just like the questions he just asked. Without more relevant intelligence, he would not be able to learn anything if he was deliberately restrained. It would be useless to ask. It was just that the Mind Beast was something Chen Ming had just come into contact with, and Chimyun did not realize the problem, so he said it. But don't think about more. Chimyun let Chen Ming continue to ask. Anyway, he would never answer inappropriate questions. In his opinion, this deal was more of an attempt to open Whooping's heart and let him gradually accept further cooperation with their Zhuojing. This kind method was just a way to contact Whooping, and other worse methods would also be available in the future. Ask now. It's up to him whether to answer or not. The two knew each other's thoughts. So Chen Ming thought about it for a long time, and finally asked a somewhat broad question. What is the purpose of the Zhuojing organization? What do you want to do? Even if it is a cult, it must first build a basic base, right? But I only see destruction, not construction. Of course there is construction, and the construction is the hearts of believers. Sure enough, this kind of question can only get such an answer. Although this may be true, it is a dream to analyze anything from this sentence. Chen Ming also completely lost his patience and said directly to Chimyun, my psychic mutation direction is Thornzerg and Aurora Wind Spirit. After saying that, he took a glass bead from the table. That's it. There is really nothing to say to you. It's meaningless. Call me when you get there. Okay. Chimyun smiled and watched Whooping leave the captain's room and walk towards his own room. He was not angry at all and silently packed up all the glass beads. For him, it was enough to figure out what happened in the space station laboratory and the effect of Whooping's psychic power with only 3 heart-gathering spirit beads and actually answering only 2 ambiguous questions. He even told Whooping, who had just walked out, remember not to crush multiple glass beads at the same time. Otherwise, you will also become the monster you killed in the laboratory. Whooping obviously heard this, but he didn't want to continue talking to Chimyun and turned the corner of the spacecraft. After confirming that Whooping had completely left, Chimyun locked the door of the captain's room, took out his terminal, and contacted the person who had communicated with him before. I haven't contacted you for a few days. How is the situation over there? A familiar voice came from the terminal. Not good. They are still hiding with people. The Psychic Society seems to be forced into a corner. They asked Chen Ming for help. Several places they have been surrounded by Chen Ming's UA spacecraft. If we hadn't run fast once, we would have been intercepted by Chen Ming. Chimyun's expression was a little ugly when he heard Chen Ming's name. Obviously, this name has disgusted them for a long time. Chen Ming, that guy? It's really troublesome. Because of him, our development speed in the Gallo star field has obviously slowed down. Many people who know him simply can't believe in our teachings anymore. Ah, Chimyun said and suddenly sighed. It was my fault last time. I underestimated Chen Ming's ability and the time when the psychic of the 14th Legion found me. Otherwise, there should be a chance. Don't think about the past. Let's talk about it now. I can't hide for too long. His condition has begun to deteriorate. He is about to enter the terminal stage. It is not easy for him to move in the terminal stage. It is time to find a place to stay and prepare for the final stage. As long as we can hold on, we can have a place even if we are completely surrounded by the Empire. Chimyun's expression finally relieved a little, Where is the final location? As soon as he finished speaking. At this time, Chen Ming, who was using his own psychic power to secretly observe the captain's room, saw a black mist suddenly burst out from Chen Yin's body, completely covering him and the terminal in his hand, leaving no one with a possible peek. Even on the spaceship, even if there has been no contact for several days, Chen Yin is still extremely vigilant about such a critical matter. Chen Ming tooted unhappily, temporarily gave up observing Chen Yin in the black fog. And in the black fog, a voice came from the terminal in Chen Yin's hand. We have been to the Lucy galaxy of Kamo 6 once before, and Chen Ming's Yue fleet has also been there once. It should be in a dark state under the lamp. It just so happens that there is an industrial colony there with a geocentric furnace power tower. I can ask him to help hypnotize the people there and do regular maintenance on the furnace tower. You can hide while the power tower is being maintained. In the next period of time, underground should be safer than on the ground. Chen Yin nodded and said, I know. I will cooperate when the time comes. Okay. The other end of the terminal responded, and after a short silence, he suddenly said, Now that the situation is so big, I don't know how it will end. Don't worry. Chen Yin said, We will win. I hope so. This is basically the case on my side. What about your situation? Chen Yin summarized An Wuping's situation in his mind and said, An Wuping's attitude is still similar to before. He didn't show much resistance, nor did he say that he had any intention of continuing to cooperate with us. But he still may want to do something, so we still can't be too optimistic about him. More expectations, at least to make him completely lose confidence in the empire. For the sake of stability, I haven't stimulated his violent disorder in the past 2 days. If you want to slowly break through his psychological defenses, you definitely can't do it without time. So there should be no way before the real start, just treat him as an ordinary psychic for the time being. There are many people's eyes on him. At that time, I will take him to a nearby but irrelevant place to use as bait. I will be there in about 4 or 5 days. Let me know when you are ready. Time flies. 6 days later. 2 days later than Chen Ming's original plan. After changing 5 more spaceships, Chen Yin finally brought Chen Ming to the edge of the junction of the Manhwa star region in the Kamo star region next to Kamo. A comprehensive colony. As soon as he landed, Chen Yin said he would take Chen Ming to the Zhuajing base here. Chen Ming originally thought it would be some darker places. But when he really arrived, Chen Ming found that Zhuajing's base was just an ordinary-looking cafe. It was close to the edge of one of the few cities with relatively backward urbanization scale owned by the colony of this prosperous star field. There were no high-rise buildings and shuttles flying in the sky. There was only a comfortable environment close to the suburbs, giving people a leisurely feeling. However, Zhuajing is always Zhuajing. As Chen Ming entered the basement of the cafe and passed through a closed door, the slogans carved by the Zhuajing members suddenly filled his sight. Even though the basement was illuminated by the lights, a dark and crazy atmosphere still lingered here. There was no psychic fluctuation here. It was just an ordinary base, not a base for psychics. After Chen Ming confirmed this, he ignored the people here and followed Chen Yin directly to a room with a glass door in a corner of the basement. The other side can be seen clearly inside and outside the room. But there is no one here now. Chen Yin took Chen Ming to sit here and motioned Chen Ming to wait for a while. After waiting for about 10 minutes, Chen Ming heard heavy footsteps coming from the entrance of the basement. A cloaked man who was not tall walked down and walked straight towards Chen Ming. The cloak covered most of his body, making it difficult to see his specific appearance. It was impossible to tell whether he was a man or a woman, old or young. However, his footsteps were heavy, and he should be a strong man. Chen Ming could not sense the psychic fluctuations from him, but he did pay a lot of attention to this cloaked man. After all, he had just analyzed a few days ago that the dimensional infection of Zhuajing must involve a psychic. Maybe it was the one in front of him? It was a pity that Chen Ming could not see anything from him. With Chen Yin next to him, Chen Ming could not use his psychic power to release a small amount of metal liquid on the spot to track him. The cloaked man pushed the door into the small room and put down 2 identity cards. At this moment, Chen Ming finally found an opportunity. Taking the opportunity of touching the card, He reached out and touched the sleeve of the cloaked man. The iron atoms that were invisible to the naked eye had been stained on his cloak. This was something he had prepared before. The mental power required to control this level of iron atoms was also completely covered by Nwupiang's mental power, and there was no possibility of being discovered. When Chen Ming did this, the cloaked man's body suddenly shook slightly. But he didn't say anything in the end, and turned around and left here silently. So far, Chen Ming's iron atoms can still clearly locate the whereabouts of the cloaked man. It can be seen that the cloaked man walked out of the cafe, boarded a shuttle, and went to the city. It is not clear what he will do next, and it will take time to confirm. In the basement of the cafe, after confirming that everyone had left, Chen Ming stroked the card in his hand and said to Chen Ming, "This card?" Chen Ming finally put down the terminal, took the card and said, "The things I need next, you keep them first. Jean Camo needs more than just this, and we have to wait for 2 days. You can just wander around here for the next 2 days, stay here or go to the city with me later. I'll let you know if there's any news. Aren't you worried about being discovered? Can't you be careful not to expose yourself? If you expose yourself now, the result will be no different from exposing a left-wing element who has carried out a massacre. We are in the same boat." "Okay, then I'd rather go to the city." Chimya nodded and said, "Wait for me for a moment. I have something else to do here." He was just about to get up and go out. Suddenly, the basement door of the cafe was violently kicked open by something, making a loud noise. Chinyan hesitated, frowned, and looked in the direction of the basement door. Chen Ming's spirits were also slightly lifted, and he looked at the door with some expectation. A few seconds later, the person who just kicked the door walked into the basement. Chen Ming also saw his appearance clearly. It was Hui. Hui had a dark face, and his eyes swept across Nwupiang and then locked on Qianmian. Then, the terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations that Chen Ming had only seen on the boss surged throughout the basement. Qianmian suddenly shouted loudly, "Don't move!" Just when Chen Ming was wondering that the surging spiritual energy fluctuations seemed to have done nothing. His sense of danger was suddenly triggered. Nwupiang was in extreme danger at the moment, and the dangerous tingling feeling in his mind was desperately sounding the alarm. Chen Ming's expression became solemn, because he finally found the problem. In a small space that was almost close to Nwupiang's skin, a huge amount of entropy suddenly appeared out of thin air. These entropies were restrained by the spiritual energy, which was equivalent to a terrifying high heat being restricted to Nwupiang's body. Any violent movement would cause his body to come into contact with the surrounding high heat. At this time, the air around Nwupiang had been distorted, and his naked eyes could no longer see clearly what was happening next to him. But from the perspective of the other iron atoms left in the basement by Chen Ming, the environment of the entire basement was still adjusted by the air conditioner at a suitable 24 degrees. Only near the people in the basement was there a terrifying high heat created by his spiritual energy. One of the left-wingers didn't seem to want to listen to Chimyan's words and didn't notice the danger around him, so he stood up from his seat. However, he just made the move, and he sublimated into the air. Not to mention the corpse, not even a bit of ash was left. This is Hu Yi's psychic power. Although the boss said that Hu Yi was suspected of not having a good brain. But the fact that he was able to force the boss to confront him alone before was enough to prove that he was definitely not a simple psychic. At this moment, Chen Ming also found that his road to revenge seemed a little far away. In the case of being caught first, he seemed to be unable to attack Hu Yi even if he relied on the information gap. Of course, although Chen Ming had temporarily put aside his plan to avenge Hu Yi after being approached by the boss a few days ago. After all, Hu Yi did not directly hurt him, and he was also prepared to compensate. But he still wanted to take revenge as in Nwupiang. If Hu Yi could really resist and survive, then forget it. Anyway, Hu Yi should not be able to tell that Nwupiang is him. Although he now feels that it is indeed difficult for Nwupiang to attack Hu Yi, and there is even a possibility that he will be killed directly. However, no matter how strong the psychic is, they all have weaknesses. For example, Yin Xiong's weakness is in his body, and he will be killed by a bomb. The weakness of the boss and himself is that they are too fragile, and it is easy to get into trouble if someone finds their real body. So Hui definitely has some weaknesses that can be targeted. Chen Ming firmly believes in this, so he is a little relieved. But his vigilance against Hui has not decreased at all. Chen Ming had never met Hui before, so he despised him a little, but from today on, Chen Ming will be very careful to deal with Hui. At this moment, Wuan, who is also in the Kamo Star region, but in the next door to Kamo 1, finally received Hui's message. After confirming that Hui had found in Wuping and Qinyan through the information given to him by Chen Ming, he showed a little smile on his face, a smile of fun. He supported Hui to find trouble with Zhu Jing, and also supported Chen Ming to retaliate with the identity of Wu Ping. He supported Hui because Zhu Jing dared to act like a clown in front of him. He supported Chen Ming because Hui was at least a psychic of the same level as him. Although there was a gap between people of the same level, the gap between people of the same level was much greater than the gap between people of different levels. So for Chen Ming, fighting with a psychic one level higher was the best way for him to recognize the level of his own ability. So Wuan was now looking forward to what would happen next. Of course, Chen Ming also said that he would take action after solving Zhu Jing's troubles, and Wuan also told Hui not to take action against Wu Ping, so it would not affect what happened next. At this moment, in the basement of the cafe in Zhuajing stronghold, Hui pushed the door and walked into the room in the corner. He threw a photo on the table and said to Qinyan, "Come, give me an explanation." Chen Ming glanced at the photo. This photo was the one Hui recorded when he assassinated him in the 14th Core Branch. Now the situation has been confirmed. Zhuajing assassinated him, and Qinyan in front of him personally carried out the assassination and finally put the blame on Hui. Qinyan suddenly exploded into a ball of black mist, bypassing the entropy cage surrounding him, and appeared at the door of another closed room. "Come in and talk." Hui put away the photo and followed Qinyan into a small room. Everyone outside, including Chen Ming, was trapped in the cage. Half an hour later, when the two appeared again, their expressions were somehow very satisfied. Hui patted Qinyan's shoulder as if he was very familiar with him and said, Okay, let me see what confidence you have." Hui patted Qinyan's shoulders a few times and walked out of the basement. Qinyan sent him off with a smile and returned to Chen Ming's side. As Hui left, the entropy cage around him was completely unlocked. Chen Ming immediately pretended to know nothing and asked Qinyan, who had just returned, "Who is that person? What happened just now?" "Hui, a very strong psychic, has dealt with some historical problems, don't worry. But you seem to be chatting happily. Are there any cooperation?" "It's not really cooperation, just asking him not to mess with us." Qinyan looked like he didn't want to say more, and after telling Chen Ming a few words, he got up again to do what he had just been interrupted by Hui's arrival. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, Qinyan finally finished his business and took Chen Ming on the shuttle to the city. And he was very arrogant and openly found a luxury hotel to open 2 single rooms. After throwing the room card to Chen Ming, Qinyan disappeared, and no one knew where he ran to. Although Chen Ming tried to throw iron atoms on him, it was a pity that it didn't work, because Qinyan couldn't leave iron atoms on him. Even if the iron atoms didn't show psychic fluctuations when controlled by Chen Ming, he couldn't risk letting the iron atoms come into contact with the body of a psychic whose upper limit was temporarily unknown. So Chen Ming's only chance to leave iron atoms was on Qinyan's clothes. The iron atoms on clothes were too unreliable, and they would disappear when changing clothes. However, Qinyan had the habit of changing a new handsome face every day, and Chen Ming had seen it several times. Once Qinyan changed his face, he would change into a new outfit. In addition, the psychic energy of black fog must be based on the will of the psychic when it is transferred. The iron atoms that Chen Ming stuck on must not be part of Qinyan's cognition and would be left behind. There was no way to track Qinyan at all. The only thing that didn't change was that he was missing the little finger on his left hand. Chen Ming shook his head and pulled his thoughts back to the present from Qinyan. At least the hotel room that Qinyan booked was good. Standing by the window, you can see a huge park in front of the headquarters of the nearby colonial government, as well as the area of the local government department that occupies a larger area. The scenery is not bad. It seems that because of the recent situation in the Kamo Star region next door, The security forces deployed in the area of the galaxy government here are quite strong. It seems to be a bit too strong. However, special circumstances require special treatment. It is not too outrageous that the galaxy belonging to Manhwa, which is close to the Kamo star region, has such security forces. Chen Ming retracted his gaze from the window. Chen also said before that it would take time to enter the Kamo star region, so he could take a walk and rest. Chen Ming can indeed relax a little in the next 2 days. One of the purposes of controlling and whooping to come out is to do this. But this kind of thing is not the first priority. He has more things to do now. He is not really out for a trip. He has to find a way to confirm the specific location of their person infected by the dimension through Zwujing. Chen said before using black fog to hide his conversation with another person that the person from Zwujing was about to enter the final stage and needed to find a place to stay. Although we don't know where exactly, it must be somewhere hidden in Kamo. It is definitely related to Chen. But Chen Ming has not had much contact with Zwujing, and it is too difficult to get clues from here, and Chen has already run away. We can only start the investigation from positive means and try to find out where the person from Zwujing will go directly. Chen Ming took out the terminal from the prosthesis of the 14th core branch, but did not contact the president immediately, but first sensed the location of the cloaked man he had marked before. He did not change his clothes, but just boarded a spaceship, and there was no other movement for the time being. Through the model of his spaceship and the flight number, it can be analyzed that the destination of this spaceship is not Kamo or any other place related to this incident. Chen Ming did not continue to pay more attention to this cloaked man. After making sure that nothing else happened, Chen Ming called the president. Chen Ming, it's me. I want to ask what's going on in the past few days. Although the information from the 5th Legion is firsthand, it's too messy. I think there is information that has been coordinated. Well, it's not easy to do. Just look at the document. The president transmitted the work documents of the past few days to Chen Ming. In short, Wuan gave me a piece of information a few days ago. The purpose of Zwujing's dimensional infection is to strengthen a psychic. In a sense, the source of the dimensional infection is a living person, not a clone that has turned into a piece of meat. Chen Ming, the initiator of the disguised identity discovered by the boss a few days ago, confirmed with shock. Is there such a thing? Yes, so the difficulty of tracking the dimensional infection caused by Zwujing has increased to a new level. Those galaxies that have been checked cannot be counted as checked, and all have to be torn down and started over. I was originally planning to wait until you check the remaining highly suspected places tomorrow and tell you this news. Since you asked in advance, you can actually stop now. It doesn't make much difference. Chen Ming agreed to the president's request to stop investigating the information that was previously suspected and asked, "Since you don't need me to investigate, what will happen later?" What to do? How can we track down a psychic who is the source of a dimensional infection that can move? There is still a way. The president's tone was not too anxious. First of all, I have to mention the places where the newborn deformity rate is 100% that I told you about 2 days ago. I remember this. What's wrong? The place with 100% deformity rate is the place where the psychic who was strengthened by the dimensional infection in Zwujing went. Is there such a thing? Of course there is. The president emphasized and said, different places with 100% deformity rate do not reach 100% deformity rate at the same time. But it happens that the newborn deformity rate in each area reaches 100% at the same time. The time interval from reaching 100% is basically the same as the time interval for an ordinary spaceship to arrive at another place from one place. Combined with the information sent by Wuan, we can be sure that the person in Zwujing is definitely moving. The news can be mutually verified, so there will be basically no mistakes in this news. Unless it is some special psychic, moving in Kamo star domain must follow the basic rules of our universe. Even Zwujing can only move through hyperspace or spaceships. If you want to move through psychic power, the movement will definitely not be small, but it will be easier for us to find it. With the maximum speed of the spaceship and the rate of distortion reached 100%. The two data are combined, and we can circulate a rough range of a left diameter. Search for the area where the investigation is investigated. If a new galaxy has reached 100% in the process, then we will change the new goal at any time until the location of the left diameter is found. Gathering the gaze of another dimension is gathered on him. So when the relative position of the main universe and the other dimension has not changed, and even the source of the dimension infection has not been cleaned, the rapid increase of distortion is really a matter of time and the interval between the sudden surge in regional mutations according to the two distorted regions. Chen Ming also followed this idea and thought of a more advanced operation. If we can calculate where the first ring of the left axis might go, then the second ring can actually be found, right? It's just that the range will be very large. But with a little preparation, it should be possible. When the left axis really starts to move, we can go to the destination faster to block people. The president was a little surprised and delighted that Chen Ming came up with such an arrangement in an instant. This is what we are doing. In 3 days at most, we can completely lock down the whereabouts of the left axis. What about after that? The president said 2 short words mercilessly. Kill it. I hope nothing goes wrong by then. Chen Ming said casually and brought up other topics. The source of the dimensional infection of the left axis is that the boss gave me the information about the psychic, right? Did the boss tell me where he got the information from? He said he has someone in Zhujiang, but he didn't say anything else. You can go ask him. Maybe he will tell you. Chen Ming was silent for a while, then asked, What else? Is there anything else important? Nothing else. Now we are basically changing the direction of work and using new methods to track Zhujiang. The whole Kayamo is still the same. It can be clearly felt that the resistance faced by the people working below is greater than before. Zhujiang really has a brainwashed psychic, and there is no escape. By the way, the president suddenly remembered something and said, Someone is complaining about you. Ah. Chen Ming didn't react and asked, Complaining about me? Yes, because your afterglow fleet is running around in Kamo. Some people who know the effect of your psychic power are unhappy with you. Some people think that your afterglow can help you spread your psychic power and control the various star systems in Kamo. At that time, it is not certain whether Kamo's surname is Kai or Chan. Chen Ming was silent again. After a while, he spoke, To be honest, it is normal to have such doubts, but I have never done anything out of the ordinary, right? Besides, my afterglow fleet also relies on scanning to do its work, and it is not in contact with colonies when it lands. If you have to say, it will be in contact when it goes to some space stations for supply. You can't not let me supply, right? And what are they as psychics? Using psychic power has a mental burden. This is a star field. I don't have the mental power to control it. Of course, Chen Ming likes you to say that. In fact, if the afterglow helps to control it, these controlled things will not be a big mental burden for him. And he has indeed done some out of the ordinary things. For example, when he helped Nwupian get an identity, he did control the equipment of a star district government and a galaxy government department. But no one knows about Nwupian. If no one knows, it didn't happen. At least Chen Ming would never do anything beyond the limit when he was acting in his own identity. The president gave Chen Ming a reassuring reply. I know, so I explained it to the person who complained about you. Whether it is the level of the empire or the level of our association, there are regulations and restrictions for psychics. Those people who complained about you at the beginning may really be kind, but those who still mention it after the explanation are likely to have ulterior motives. We will focus on these people first, don't worry. That's good. Chen Ming felt a little relieved. Although he didn't care about those complaints, it would not be good if someone blocked his actions in Kamo because of such things. Then I want to ask about the situation in Hongma Star region next to Kamo. It seems that it is not written in the document. The president did not quite understand what Chen Ming meant and asked, Of course it is not written if there is nothing going on. Why do you care about this? I heard that the boss went there, so I asked out of curiosity. Oh. The president thought for a while and said, There should be nothing serious in Hongma. If there is, then the star region leader of Kamo Star Region, their star region leader, is temporarily in Hongma, protected by the 5th Legion to avoid suspicion. Where? It's hard to say. It's not that I don't trust you, but I don't know either. The situation in Kamo Star region is too chaotic. The brainwashed psychics of Zwajing have caused us a lot of trouble. Many people who shouldn't be Zwajing have become. Is it possible to find Zwajing? For an important person like the Star Domain Chief, his safety is absolutely the first priority, whether there is any problem or not. The Star Domain Chief is also willing to take the initiative to avoid suspicion and choose to leave temporarily, leaving the command power to the 5th Legion and our association. Then we definitely can't regard the Star Domain Chief as an enemy, right? Chen Ming was a little surprised to hear this. He just handed over the power like this? At least there is the guarantee of the Empire. For a government person, doing this is the most decent and stable way to do things. There is nothing to say. Okay, then I have nothing to ask. Okay, I will give you a real-time update of the possible galaxy location of Zwajing later. If you find anything, remember to notify me. The communication ended. Chen Ming put away the terminal. At this time, Whooping, who was in the red ink star domain, also stopped leaning against the window in a daze. Took the new ID card, disguised it a little, and left the hotel. 2 days later, the president still couldn't completely locate the location of Zwajing. However, the approximate location of the left path that can be locked has been reduced by nearly half in 2 days. It will probably not take long to completely lock the left path. Whooping, who is in Manhwa, is still waiting for Chen to come and give him a clear time to enter Kamo. However, Chen Ming did not wait for Chen, but instead waited for a piece of news that he did not want to hear from his subordinate Yue. In a star system that the left path sent by the 5th Legion may go to, Chen Ming's Yue fleet was stopped by a local patrol team, and Chen Ming's fleet was not allowed to enter the star system for investigation. The thing that Chen Ming had just told the president about his worries 2 days ago appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. Although some people had secretly made trouble before, such as not giving Chen Ming's fleet supplies and other small troubles, these troubles were forcibly dealt with by the president before. But I didn't expect that there would be someone who was so excessive that the fleet directly blocked the road. After receiving the report from his subordinate Yu, Chen Ming was too lazy to talk nonsense with these people who didn't know if they had problems with their brains or were brainwashed by Zwajing, and directly called the president. After hearing Chen Ming's words clearly, the president immediately said, "There's no rush. Since you called, I have to tell you something. It's the red ink, 12 next to Kamo, which also has a 100% distortion rate." Chen Ming was stunned for a moment and immediately realized what this red ink, 12 meant. Did the people from Zwajing escape? Probably not, because after the 100% distortion rate on Manhwa 12, the next information with a 100% distortion rate is still in Kamo, and they are still moving into Kamo. We can now also identify 4 possible galaxies. Which 4? Lucy Galaxy. Someone has already investigated the Koshi Galaxy, the Jinsi Galaxy, and the Nanchi Galaxy. Your fleet had better go there as well. I know. After explaining the current situation, the president said, "So it doesn't matter who is blocking you, because we have entered the next round. Just go ahead. There is no need to investigate where your fleet is." That's right, but the people who blocked me still need to be investigated. There is something wrong with their behavior. I will definitely do that. Don't worry. Well, I'll give the order directly. Okay, that's it. Hang up the communication. Chen Ming immediately gave his subordinate Yu an order to give up investigating the current galaxy and go to the next location. At the same time, he began to have doubts in his heart. The reason was what the president said. Manhwa 12 also showed a 100% distortion rate. This proves that the psychic from Zwajing has been here. The first person that Chen Ming suspected was, of course, the cloaked man in the basement of the Zwajing stronghold. Chen Ming immediately used the iron atoms left on the cloaked man to sense it. However, unlike the clear perception before, this time his perception was very vague, as if covered by a layer of gauze. Chen Ming immediately realized that the troops had something wrong with this cloaked man. Could he be the brainwashed psychic from Zwajing? But Chen Ming clearly had no feelings for him when they met before, and he clearly felt at least a little tingling in his brain when he encountered the dimensional infection. But his sense of danger did not react at all before. How could it be him? And the cloaked man came to deliver the identity card before. Was it really necessary for such an important person from Zhujiang to deliver it in person? Chen Ming did not understand. But vague perception would not lie. Chen Ming could not accurately locate him, but through the star map, he could roughly determine that the cloaked man's current location was around the several galaxies that the president had just mentioned. Chen Ming did not believe that there were so many coincidences in the world. If so many coincidences appeared together, then this was not a coincidence. But the truth, he had to find this cloaked man. Chen Ming once again gave Yu Hui an urgent order, and he also had to go there in person. But entering KMO, within Wu Ping's current identity, is impossible, and he still has to rely on Chen Yan. So Chen Ming can't do anything else now, so he'd better continue to wait. Although Chen Ming was a little anxious, he still sat back on the sofa in the hotel. But at the moment when his butt touched the sofa, he suddenly realized something. If the cloaked man is really the brainwashed psychic of Zhujiang, then has the brainwashed psychic power been used when he came into contact with him before? Chimyan's ability to induce his mental loopholes was definitely taken from the brainwashed psychic. Chimyan can avoid his perception to a certain extent when using this psychic power. If it is the original body, Chen Ming felt a little worried. His mental power was highly concentrated on himself, and he searched for his own situation, especially the area in his brain that was theoretically affected by the violent disease. Ah! Chen Ming exhaled. There is good news and bad news. The bad news is that there is something wrong in Wu Ping's useless brain. The good news is that he discovered this wrong thing. After confirming this, Chen Ming left the hotel directly, came to the suburbs and used his own psychic power to thoroughly check himself. Fortunately, this time his consciousness itself did not leave anything. After Chimyan made trouble last time, Chen Ming did enough to protect his consciousness first, and this time his consciousness was not affected. The psychic power of that brainwashed psychic is really pervasive. A deep murderous intent appeared in Chen Ming's heart. Such a psychic, whether he is infected by the dimension or not, as long as he is still a psychic of Zhujiang, he must die. Just when Chen Ming was walking towards the city again, Chimyan was at the local base at this time, and was in the black fog again, contacting others. Although his face was expressionless at this time, his slightly trembling hands still showed his mentality. I can start at any time? No hurry. Wait until the people leave before starting. The voice in the terminal seemed to sense Chimyan's emotions and comforted him. You said we would win. You must believe this yourself. Chimyan's mind flashed through all the bad news he had received in the past few days. The Empire seemed to have discovered their situation and had changed its search strategy. It really looked like they could be captured at any time. It was really hard for him not to be nervous. Is this the biggest commotion we have made in the past few decades? The voice in the terminal was a little heavy. Yes, this can delay everyone's actions to a certain extent and distract their attention. Although there may be more violent counterattacks later, it is a long time to delay. We need time for him to master this power. Chimyan took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it for himself. After taking a puff, he said, I heard that he has a new code name? Yes, the recipient. An hour later, Chimyan was the only one left in the basement of Zhujiang base. He checked the time, picked up the terminal, found Wu Ping's number and dialed it. Go to the port. We are ready to leave. The port of a colony is usually on a space station connected to the ground by a space elevator. Chen Ming took some time and took the elevator to the space station. As soon as he entered the port area of the space station, someone from Zhujiang came to take Chen Ming to a civilian destroyer and sent Chen Ming all the way to the captain's room of the spacecraft. Chimyan was not here at this time, but there was a lighted terminal on the table next to him, which showed Chimyan's appearance. Chen Ming picked up the terminal and asked Chimyan, What are you doing? You will know soon. You stay on the boat first. I will go there later. What do you want to do? Go see the scenery. You called me here. Are you looking at the scenery yourself? Or are you going to broadcast something to me in real time? You will know soon. Chen Ming watched the screen darken and Chimyan's figure disappeared on the terminal. His heart suddenly sank. Although it can be seen from the background that Chimyan is now in a place with abundant green plants in the city, but it is impossible to track him down. It is still the same problem. There is no iron atom left on Chimyan. So Chen Ming is not sure what Chen Ming is doing and what he wants to do. Suddenly, Chen Ming felt a slight vibration around him. He immediately looked out alertly. Why is the ship sailing? Chen Ming immediately rushed to the command room, but the left-handed elements here just lowered their heads and silently operated the spacecraft. No one answered his question. Chen Ming's eyes swept through the command room. What exactly does Wajing want to do? At this time, Chimyan also hung up the video call with the terminal on the spacecraft and stood up from the bench in the park in front of the government department. He contacted another person and said, "The person has left. We can start. I hope the news is accurate." The news must be accurate. The real star domain leader of Kamo was arranged here by the 5th Legion, and the star domain leader of Hongma, one is a fake. Okay. Chimyan let out a long breath. By the way, I plan to take this opportunity to stimulate Unwhooping. Some doubts came from the terminal. You said before that he is in a good state recently. It's not a good time to influence him. I know that the effect of that medicine is really good. I haven't seen Unwhooping affected by Berserk for a long time, and I can't use the receiver's psychic power to influence him. But because of this, I want to take this opportunity to stimulate him, so that his Berserk can at least show some initial symptoms, so that it will be convenient for me to use the receiver's psychic power to induce him. And the seeds left by the receiver when he came last time should be almost gone, right? The terminal immediately responded, yes. He said that the seeds have taken root and can sprout at any time. That's it. In an empty corner of the park, Chimyan's appearance gradually changed into Unwhooping's appearance, and his height gradually matched Unwhooping's. In his pocket, he crushed the gray-green glass beads that were condensed by the psychic fluctuations scattered in daily life in the past few days. Chimyan could feel that his physical fitness was improving. When the effect of the psychic fluctuations was fully applied, he pressed the button of a micro-monitoring device on his shoulder. At this time, on the spaceship that had just left the port, the terminal that Chen Ming had just put aside suddenly lit up. A picture appeared on the terminal. Through the slight corner of the government building exposed between the large green plants in front, Chen Ming finally saw that Chimyan was standing in the large park at the moment. Due to the perspective problem, Chen Ming could not see Chimyan's appearance at this time, but from the direction he was facing now, he could see that Chimyan was probably going to do something big next. What do you want to do? Chen Ming's question certainly did not get Chimyan's answer. Chimyan just kept silent and walked to the gate of the government department step by step. Immediately, a security guard came forward and signaled Chimyan to stop. What do you want? The government department is under martial law recently. If there is nothing important, come here after a while when it is open. Chimyan did not respond, but suddenly stretched out his hand and broke his neck in the stunned eyes of the security guard. A shrill alarm sounded in front of the government department immediately. At the moment when all the security guards stationed at the gate directly fired at Chimyan without hesitation. Chen Ming finally saw Chimyan's face at the moment through the surveillance that was shot away by the bullet. That was Unwhooping's face. Asshole. When Chen Ming saw this scene, he couldn't help it. He wanted to tear the hull of his spaceship apart and land directly on the ground from space. But when he thought of the orbital defense facilities on the planet, he still suppressed this impulsive thought. After a brief thought, he chose to crush the black fog heart gathering spirit bead in his hand. The thick black fog instantly enveloped Unwhooping. Chen Ming, who had been exposed to the black fog's spiritual energy fluctuations and had a considerable understanding of black fog, immediately mastered the use of black fog. His body sneaked into the shadows. At the same time, Chimyan had already torn the defense line outside the government department with the power from Unwhooping. His clothes had long been tattered by bullets, but he did not cover up at all, but put Unwhooping's face in front of everyone. He tore the front armor of an armored vehicle parked in front of the government building and smashed the torn armor plate directly at the tactical team that had just rushed out of the building on the other side. Continue to walk into the building as if nothing happened. The moment he walked into the building, a wave of psychic energy swept over, and the harsh sound waves targeted Chimyan, directly tearing his eardrums that had been strengthened by Unwhooping's psychic energy. A psychic with sonic power. Such a psychic can rely on sound to lock all those who sneak into the building, which is indeed a good way to prevent assassinations. However, Chen Ming chose to attack head-on this time. Chen Ming covered his ears, and after confirming that he was deaf, he locked the position along the direction of the psychic energy wave. He flew out, pierced through the floor and the first wall of the second floor, and rushed in front of the sonic psychic. A punch hit his chest, making a muffled sound of sound vibration. The sonic psychic flew backwards in response, even though he had a layer of sonic armor visible to the naked eye. He was still seriously injured by this punch, but fortunately he was immediately dragged away by several fearless security guards. Chen Ming did not continue to chase the sonic psychic, because he knew the purpose of his coming. While the smoke and dust from the explosion had not completely dissipated, he rushed all the way into the depths of the government building. Amid the shrill alarms and hail of bullets, Chen Ming finally found the place he was looking for. He kicked hard at the ground, breaking 3 layers of the ground in succession and entering the underground. His purpose was extremely clear. Soon, he came to a closed heavy metal door. Inside is the safe house that protects the star domain leader. Chen Ming turned his head and looked at both sides. The designer would definitely not make the wall thinner than the door when designing it. Then there was only one way to enter: destroy the door. At present, the power brought to his body by enwhooping spiritual energy was not enough to tear the door apart, but there were other means. Chen Ming moved his body slightly and entered the insect state under the influence of enwhooping spiritual energy. This time, the insect state he entered was obviously closer to enwhooping than before. Not only did all the carapaces turn into a pitch-black color, but there was also a significant increase in body size. It was completely different from the last time when only part of the body tissue showed the characteristics of the thorn zerg. Chen Ming was not sure whether he had gradually become familiar with enwhooping psychic power, or whether the psychic fluctuations left by enwhooping in his normal state had some unique features. But it was not important. The important thing was that he could now use the plasma of the Aurora Wind Spirit to destroy the door. After the last bombing, Chen Ming quickly evacuated to the other side after creating plasma on the door. He did not return to the door until his eardrums, which had recovered under the effect of psychic power, heard the sound of the explosion. The violent plasma had burned the surrounding environment into crystals, and the heavy metal door was completely twisted by the destruction of the plasma. Chen Ming could vaguely see the security guards who were ready to die, and the head of the Kamo star domain who was under heavy protection. His hands covered with black carapaces were clasped on the twisted door, and he was about to tear it apart. However, at this moment, a cloud of black mist suddenly exploded in the shadow below the gate. Chen Ming finally arrived. The moment he saw Chen Ming's anger reached its peak at this moment. He grabbed Chen Ming and threw him out, smashing him on the other wall of the 3rd underground floor, leaving a heavy human-shaped depression. The dark carapace on Chen Ming's body cracked, and gray-green blood continued to flow out. The next moment, Chen Ming was directly pulled up from the ground by Chen Ming. "You bastard!" Chen Ming could feel enwhooping shocked and angry emotions, but he smiled instead, surprised. "The remnants of your spiritual energy fluctuations can also be used by me." Chen Ming was of course surprised, but he was not surprised by this at all, but that Chen Ming could transform into this appearance. Whether it is the insect form or the ability of plasma, none of them are given by psychic energy, but the result of the Queen of Insects using genes. How can Chen Ming extract this ability from enwhooping? This is problematic. But this is not the problem that needs to be solved now. What really needs to be solved is why Chen Ming came here. Although Chen Ming already had a guess in his mind at this time, he still asked knowingly, "Who was the person inside?" Chen Ming said truthfully, "The star domain leader of Kamo star domain." Chen Ming dragged Chen Ming and smashed him against the wall next to him, and roared in a low voice, "You want to kill him and put the blame on me?" "Yes, what? Any objection?" Chen Ming has already actively provoked enwhooping in his words. Then Chen Ming also did as Chen Ming wished, and the violent aura on his body surged again. "If I stop you now, then I can also completely clear myself." "Yes." Chen Ming spoke the truth again and admitted it. "But unfortunately, you were a step late, and the black fog you brought actually helped me." Chen Ming turned into black, missed the moment he finished speaking. In an instant, He disappeared from Chen Ming's hand and appeared in the safe house that had been opened. The black mist obscured everyone's vision. Only the Star Domain chief could see clearly that the face shell in front of him had been broken, revealing Chen Yin's face of Enwhooping. In the face of death, no matter how noble a person is, he can only tremble in fear like an ordinary person. Chen Yin easily passed his right hand through the Star Domain chief's chest, and Chen Ming outside did not make any move. It's not that he didn't want to stop it, but at the current distance, even if he realized what Chen Yin was going to do next, he couldn't stop it. Unless he could arrive before the door was destroyed and stop Chen Yin from destroying the door. Otherwise, once the door with the silent alloy inside was destroyed, the safe house filled with shadows inside would no longer be able to protect Chen Yin. It was impossible for him to protect an ordinary person in Chen Yin's hands. He just vented his emotions. No wonder Chen Yin let him get on the spaceship first and had someone drive the spaceship out. If he came, the black mist on his body would be regarded as evidence that Zhu Jing and Enwhooping cooperated to assassinate the Star Domain leader. If he didn't come, the Star Domain leader would die. It was not right to come, and it was not right not to come. Chen Ming could only pretend to be Enwhooping's character. The only solution to this situation was that he came early enough, and maybe he could save the Star Domain leader. Although this would cause Zhu Jing to deepen his suspicion of him. But between the death of a Star Domain leader and his suspicion by Zhu Jing, Chen Ming would rather choose to be suspected. Unfortunately, he had no choice. Chen Yin turned into black mist again and came outside. Chen Ming could see that the black shell on his body had almost recovered, and it seemed that he did have some of the abilities of the Queen of Insects. When Chen Yin saw Enwhooping staying outside without any action, he said, "You are also a smart person. Things have happened, and you can't change anything. Unless you want to be buried with this man here, let's go." Shrouded in black fog, Chen Yin disappeared underground, obviously trying to catch up with the spaceship where Chen Ming was just now. Chen Ming did not catch up immediately, but looked back at the safe house where the black fog was gradually dissipating. It has already happened. Zhu Jing did drag him into the water. The seriousness of assassinating the Star Domain leader is really not comparable to the previous minor incidents. Chen Ming felt that the evidence that Enwhooping was a good person that he left on the space station was not enough to extricate him from the assassination. This cannot go on. He must leave some evidence here, some evidence that cannot be easily discovered. Otherwise, once Zhu Jing obtains this evidence, then as a person lurking in Zhu Jing, he will definitely be targeted by Zhu Jing in the opposite direction. If he encounters Chen Yin or other Zhu Jing psychics at the same time, Enwhooping is not there is no possibility of a rollover. Chen Ming still hasn't figured out the upper limit of Chen Yin's psychic power. Even if he just smashed Chen Yin against the wall, he couldn't say whether Chen Yin had only this much power. He still had to use his own psychic power. Chen Ming looked at the corner next to him, where he used his psychic power to create a surveillance device that was exactly the same as the one in the government building. He also took a video of Chen Ming and Chen Yin talking. Although it was just covered by black fog, the video still showed that both of them were wearing Enwhooping's face, which should serve as part of the evidence. Chen Yin took a photo to frame him, and this time, Chen Ming also made a backup plan in advance. But this thing is not in a hurry to be discovered. Chen Ming used his psychic power a little bit and buried this thing deeper underground. At the same time, it also caused another damage to the wall next to it. When the relevant personnel come to deal with it, it will take at least 1 or 2 days to dig out this thing deep underground. Then he turned into black mist and silence and returned to the previous spaceship. The spaceship entered the Kamo Star region before the chaos caused by the death of the Star region leader broke out completely. Chen Ming ignored Chen Yin in the captain's room and returned to the room alone, thinking about something. The evidence he left in the basement of the government building was not enough. He needed another piece of evidence that could be proved by others. The boss had said before that he would not intervene directly, so Chen Ming had to choose someone else. Then he actually had only one choice. Someone from the Odin government. The Odin government was the first person Chen Ming met under the identity of Enwhooping. And Chen Ming could also confirm from the president that Odin had been looking for him, had some ideas about him, and seemed to have used some strange means. Since the Outon Star region trusts him so much, If he provides intelligence to Aodon now, Aodon should also selectively believe it. And since Aodon has such close contact with the president, Chen Ming can also share some intelligence that only Whooping knows without contacting the president. Chen Ming is not worried about the boss, but Chen Ming is still more worried that Whooping will directly contact the president and expose the situation. It would be best if there is an extra middleman. After thinking it through, Chen Ming called the Anti-Cult Bureau again. I'm looking for your deputy director. With the experience of Chen Ming calling the operator of the Anti-Cult Bureau directly twice before. This time, the moment Chen Ming spoke, the voice print locking program installed in the communication equipment directly connected Chen Ming's call to the deputy director. And Whooping? It's me. Chen Ming responded and said, you probably already know my situation. It's normal for you to doubt me, and I understand. So I'll just give you a simple explanation. It's up to you whether you believe it or not. Before, there was a psychic in Zwajing who interfered with my brain, which triggered my violent disorder in advance. I immediately went to the Zwajing space station that I had investigated before to solve the problem. However, when I had almost killed all the Zwajing, 3 cruisers with the local Bainu Starfield government logo came over. They destroyed the space station and put the blame on me. 2 of the 3 cruisers were sunk by me, and 1 was completely gone. You can go check it out, and you should be able to find something. The deputy director believed what Chen Ming said. After all, they had already analyzed that there was something wrong with Bainu. He immediately clicked a few times on the terminal next to him, and after issuing the order, he asked Chen Ming a question he had been thinking about. Why did you contact us now? If you need it, we can stand up and help you prove your identity. Chen Ming explained, because I need to make Zwajing believe that I have nowhere to go, and let them believe that I can only follow them. If someone else reveals their friendly attitude towards me, it is very likely that Zwajing will be unnecessarily vigilant against me. The deputy director understood what Chen Ming meant. Do you want to solve Zwajing's problems by yourself? This is too arrogant or crazy. The deputy director did not answer this question and asked again, so why are you calling now? Because Zwajing has made a big deal. I feel that the evidence I left behind that I am a good person is a bit untenable. What happened? The head of Kamo Star Domain was assassinated. Who? The deputy director was stunned for a moment and tilted his head slightly, trying to hear more clearly from the phone. The head of the Kamo Star region who is staying in Homa 12. Hiss. The deputy director took a breath, digested it, and asked, who assassinated him? Me. Before the deputy director could catch his breath, Chen Ming added, I was disguised as a psychic from Zwajing. The psychic's code name in Zwajing is Qinmian. He has the ability to obtain the abilities of other psychics and the ability to disguise himself. I don't know your attitude, and whether you will continue to believe me after confirming the news, but I'll stop here. I have only one request next. Don't spread this news. The deputy director asked, do you still want to solve it alone? I have been lurking for so long, and although I still haven't been able to gain enough trust from Zwajing, I don't want to give up all my efforts. I have some information on hand that you don't know and I can't tell you. I have a chance to end this matter. The communication was hung up. The deputy director stared at the phone for a few seconds, then called his superior who had direct contact with Liang Fei and Li Weiqi, who had arrived in Kamo 2 days ago and were on standby, and explained the matter. Soon after, Liang Fei and Li Weiqi also learned the news. What should we do? Faced with Li Weiqi's question, Liang Fei thought for a while and said, let's cooperate first. Whooping's previous actions are all what a psychic who favors the Empire should do. The Empire is now facing frequent internal problems. Hiding a person who can be confirmed to be a good person in the left path is also what we should do. What should we do next? Follow the pace of the president of the Psychic Association. Hasn't he already locked on 4-star systems? The news that Zwajing assassinated the head of Kamo Star Domain spread rapidly throughout the Empire as if it had been connected to a jump engine. Although on the surface, the head of Kamo Star Domain was in Hongamo 1, and the head of Hongamo 12 who was assassinated was fake. But for some reason, the head of Hongamo 1 has not come forward to prove this. This has led to a sudden increase in the credibility of this news. And soon, Some people noticed that the empire was using various means to cut off the seedlings of information dissemination. After the news of the assassination of the head of the star domain spread to several star domains around, only some gossip remained. But this also gave those who knew the news a hint. Zhuojing's assassination was real, and the assassin was also real. This situation also led to the second wave of information dissemination, hidden in the deeper network, connecting the entire empire to surge more rapidly. Soon, the whole process of the assassination was also placed in front of all forces. Since Chen Ming's original intention was to drag Wuping into the water, he didn't care about disguise at all. When he rushed into the government building, he only symbolically destroyed some surveillance on the road. Wuping's appearance, the plasma released after entering the insect state, caused the surrounding environment to crystallize on a small scale, and the whole process of the black fog coming and taking Wuping away were basically recorded. It was enough to completely label Wuping as a Zhuojing. The governments of several star regions involved in the assassination immediately organized a joint meeting. The Odin government, as the first to contact Wuping, also secretly moved Wuping's household registration, so of course it also joined the meeting. Since the deputy director learned about Wuping's actual situation through Chen Ming in advance, he remained silent throughout the meeting and did not join the topic of offering a reward for Wuping raised by the Binyu star region. After all the evidence is there. Pretending to be dead when the wind is against you is just to better show your face when the wind is favorable. The joint meeting of several star regions ended quickly. The final conclusion is to issue a wanted notice first and arrest the person first. But this assassination will involve more than just a few star regions. The consequences of the assassination will not only affect the Kamo star region. After all, if even the highest leader of a star region cannot be protected, then this incident will also cause a great blow to the credibility of the empire and the government, and will make some people who are not up to the standard ready to move. Under such circumstances, there is an undercurrent surging in the empire. After the assassination, Wuping, who was on the Zhuojing spacecraft entering Kamo, soon felt the existence of this undercurrent. Although Chen Ming did nothing at this moment, because although there were clues about Zhuojing, it was still unclear, and it was not time to defect. All Wuping could do was wait for Chen Ming to send him to the place next, and then wait silently. Then, one of his fleets in Kamo was attacked the moment it entered hyperspace. The patrol team that Chen Ming and the president mentioned before, which blocked his fleet from entering the galaxy for investigation, belonged to that galaxy. They followed all the way, and after Chen Ming went to a space station for supplies, they launched an attack in hyperspace without making a sound. Chen Ming's first reaction when he found out about this was not anger, but confusion. Are they here to die? Chen Ming left a total of 6 fleets in the empire. Although each fleet had only 50 ships, 10 destroyers, and 40 frigates, it seemed that the combat power was very weak. But these patrol teams were the same, all of which were mixed fleets of destroyers and frigates, without even cruisers. Even if the number was 3 times that of his fleet, what would it matter? Chen Ming was too lazy to look at them anymore. After providing psychic support, he gave full command of the battle to the Beta-class Afterglow Corps in the fleet. However, in more than 10 minutes, the fleet that was 3 times larger was easily wiped out in the face of unlimited ammunition, unlimited shields, and unlimited energy. Chen Ming had no losses at all. As for what exactly is going on with this fleet, you can figure it out with a little thought. Blocking the door in front, attacking now. It is obvious that the power of Zhuojing's psychic has spread to these people. Since Zhuojing has already let these affected people take the initiative to attack, instead of choosing to hide behind and silently do things, secretly blocking or something. That really shows that Zhuojing's plan has reached the final stage. That is the end that Chen Ming mentioned when he was in contact with someone unknown before. They should have found a suitable place to stay, most likely in the 4 places marked by the president. The other people affected by Zhuojing should also be moving soon, and Kamo Star region may soon be in chaos. Chen Ming did not go to clean up the battlefield, which was a pure waste of time. Wasting time is equivalent to following Zhuojing's wishes. So Chen Ming simply stopped restraining himself and directly modified the hyperspace channel jump system for all his spacecraft in Kamo Star region on the spot. The 6 fleets were reorganized into 4 and headed for the 4 galaxies marked by the president. When the hyperspace channel jump was over, Chen Ming found that the situation of these 4 galaxies could not be said to be very similar, but could only be said to be exactly the same. The 4 galaxies were surrounded by fleets. The sensors could definitely block the edge of the entire galaxy without any blind spots. However, the fleet outside was not in a hurry to go in at this time. It may be because of the president's previous request. It is said that they have to wait until they have the ability to directly raid Zhujiang and completely end Zhujiang before entering, so as not to give Zhujiang a chance to struggle to death. However, Chen Ming soon found that it seemed not to be the case, because the number of fleets around these galaxies has reached an outrageous level. And even if you look at it with your naked eyes, in addition to the fleet of the 5th Legion, there are some fleets that have never been seen in these fleets, which keep a safe distance from the 5th Legion. It seems that other organizations have intervened. In addition to guarding against the possible left paths in the galaxy, the 5th Army must also prevent these people from entering the galaxy earlier than them. They are about to find the target, so they want to come over to share a piece of the pie? If that's the case, then these people are too disgusting. Chen Ming evaluated it in his heart and let his fleet approach the fleet cluster at the edge of the galaxy. The arrival of the Yuhui fleet naturally attracted most of the attention. Among the 4 galaxies, the 5th Army located in the Lucy Galaxy suddenly issued a notice to the surrounding fleet group, directly pulling Chen Ming's fleet into the category of friendly forces. There was no movement in the other 3 places for the time being, and Chen Ming just asked the fleet there to stay at a safe distance for the time being and didn't care. Anyway, the main force to solve the Kamo Star region's affairs is the 5th Army, and he is also happy to cooperate. But just when he was about to take the initiative to contact the fleet commander of the 5th Army that surrounded the Lucy Star region, the president suddenly called. Chen Ming temporarily suspended the contact with the 5th Army in the Lucy Star region and turned to answer the president's call. The president seemed to have something urgent to do and asked Chen Ming quickly, "Do you know about the assassination?" "I know about it. The news spreads very quickly." "That's good. I have an important thing to do next, so I will tell you what I need to tell you first, and you can do it later." The president didn't say what important thing he was going to do. If there was something necessary, the president wouldn't hide it. So Chen Ming didn't ask any more questions and waited for the president to continue. Let's talk about the most important news first, about Zhujiang's movements. When Chen Ming heard Zhujiang, he immediately asked expectantly, "Have you determined their exact location?" The president shook his head and poured cold water on Chen Ming. No matter how accurate it is, there is no way to pinpoint these 4-star systems. They are in these 4-star systems, and they can't get away. At present, we are mainly dispatching manpower. Is the 5th Army short of manpower? It's because of what Zhujiang did. Their people infiltrated the Communication Network Management Department of Kamo Star Region and released a video using the authority of the Kamo Star Region government. What video? A video introducing their research results on dimensional infection, and the supporting research files were also transferred to an open academic resource exchange website. They directly explained their research on using the Mind Beast project to make people resistant to dimensional infection and use resistance to gain power from dimensional infection. These things were basically blocked as soon as Zhujiang came out. It's normal that you don't know, but many people have seen the content. Chen Ming didn't expect Zhujiang to throw out what they had researched. He raised his thoughts to the president with some uncertainty. Isn't directly disclosing the plan for manufacturing a nuclear bomb equivalent to directly releasing the manufacturing technology of this nuclear bomb? Moreover, the manufacturing technology of this nuclear bomb can be said to be a force with a little scientific research level, and even individuals have a certain ability to manufacture it? You can think so, but it doesn't matter. What matters is the last sentence they said. The power of dimensional infection can be seized. And I have seen that their research results are fine. The power of dimensional infection can indeed be successful as long as it cooperates with Zhujiang's research, and it can indeed be seized by others. Because this power does not come from the psychic himself, but from the flesh infected by the dimension. In any case, the consequences of Zhujiang's success are definitely not what we want to see. Can be seized. When Chen Ming heard these words, he already understood what Jing wanted to do. This is their open conspiracy. They want the empire to be overwhelmed by the benefits of this power that can affect the entire empire. And the deeper reason for their doing this, Chen Ming estimated that it should be the meaning revealed by Chen words when he called before. They need time. They want to delay time. Chen Ming directly said his thoughts. The president immediately agreed. They really want to delay time and want to muddy the waters. It's okay for them to release the entire process of the cloning experiment. The empire can basically block the materials, and there is a cloning ban, so the situation can be controlled. Now it's mainly because Jing is about to produce a finished product that is about to be completed, and this finished product can be plundered by others. Many people have been fooled and started to have thoughts that they shouldn't have, wanting to intervene, but they don't understand how much risk a power from dimensional infection will bring. Now Chen Ming knows why there are so many fleets that do not belong to the 5th Legion near the 4-star systems marked by the president. In order to stop those people, the 5th Legion obviously does not have enough manpower near those 4-star systems. And there is another question. Who can guarantee that there are no people in the 5th Legion who are affected by the left path psychics? You and the psychics in our association are the few people I can trust 100% now, so I will explain to you in advance, and your fleet may be able to play a role when the time comes. The president is extremely troubled by the current chaos in Kamo and even in the empire, but he still has to do his best. Anyway, due to the assassination and the influence of Jing's psychic, the internal conflicts of the 5th Legion have begun to accumulate, and they are generally in a crazy state. Try not to provoke them. As for the others, it's just those people anyway. It seems that the several star regions next door have the idea of intervening. After all, the losses here are Kaimo's, but the gains may belong to them. Even some companies have the intention of mixing here. It may be the influence of Jing, or it may be that they have such ideas themselves. The only good news now is that although the psychic of Jing may have brainwashed many people in the empire, there will always be some people with strong wills, and his mental strength is definitely not enough to support him to control all those he has influenced. Hearing this, Chen Ming couldn't help but say, I have a question. Didn't the 5th Legion come here to deal with Kaimo's affairs according to the wishes of the empire? Those fleets that dare to come to block the galaxy, no matter who they are, can't they be forced to leave? If it doesn't work, just use force. Do these people dare to resist? The president explained, first of all, force is not possible because most of the fleets of the 5th Legion were previously blocking the star field. Although the star system has been completely locked, it will take time for those combat forces to transfer over. If a battle breaks out directly now, it will lead to unnecessary losses, and it may even cause the people of Jing to take the opportunity to escape from the star system. As for the forced order, I have to talk about another thing I was about to tell you. Inside the Kamo star field, some star regions that originally belonged to the Kamo star field jointly issued a statement. They said that they opposed the nominal blockade of the organization headed by the 5th Legion in the Kamo star field and the actual separatist behavior, and condemned the 5th Legion's behavior for causing heavy losses to the star field. Even some people from the original 5th Legion came forward to support their actions. Chen Ming didn't react at all when he heard this. He thought that he had only been on the spaceship for a few hours, so why did so many things suddenly happen outside? He confirmed again with some uncertainty. They said the 5th Legion's behavior was separatism? The president said affirmatively, yes. Aren't they really rebelling? The rebellion also involved part of the 5th Legion's energy, so those people near the 4-star systems should be the ones who got the news and came here. They are all fence-sitters, right? They come here to take advantage of the situation when they see benefits, and they flee in all directions once the situation is not right. This must have been done by Jing. What is the attitude of the empire? The word rebellion cannot be said casually. The president agreed with Chen Ming's point of view, and then asked him the last question. What do you think? Chen Ming thought directly in the worst direction, which was also the most likely direction. Is there going to be a civil war? It's about the same. The scale should not be too large. It is only limited to the Kamo star region. After all, psychics are limited to mental power. It is unlikely that so many brainwashed people will be created in other places, but if the psychic of Zhuojing succeeds, it is hard to say what the situation will be. To be honest, Chen Ming is a little bit afraid to imagine the extremely bad situation if Zhuojing really succeeds. So even for his own sake, he must deal with Zhuojing. Actually, I also feel that there are spaceships from the galaxy government attacking my fleet. Since it is said to be a rebellion, the Empire should take action against these behaviors, right? The president hesitated for a moment. After all, Chen Ming's question was too straightforward. After thinking for a while, he decided to say, "So what I am going to do next is related to these things that are happening. Just know it, don't talk nonsense." After Kaimo's incident, it will definitely go through a major blood transfusion. And there will definitely be a lot of bloodshed before the blood transfusion. The civil war must be fought. Not to mention winning. At least it must be delayed so that others can concentrate on dealing with Zhuojing. Listening to the president's words, Chen Ming suddenly found the most ridiculous thing. That is, up to now, the people belonging to the empire don't even know who the target of the upcoming civil war is. No one knows who will be exposed as brainwashed by Zhuojing elements in the next moment and point the gun at his former comrades. Zhuojing, Chen Ming muttered with emotion, and suddenly subconsciously determined the location of the cloaked man. His perception was still as vague as before, but at least he could still be sure that the cloaked man was still inside the Kamo star region and near the 4-star systems determined by the president before. At least the direction of dealing with Zhuojing is correct now, so we have to start from these places. Then all Chen Ming can do now is wait. Wait for the combat power of the 5th Legion to arrive. Wait for them to find the real location of Zhuojing. Wait for the full-scale offensive against Zhuojing to begin. Wait for the civil war to really break out. Wait until Enwupiing arrives at the destination on Zhuojing's spaceship. At least now Enwupiing's spaceship is indeed heading towards the destination. Before ending the communication, Chen Ming asked the president the last question. What should we do when the location of Zhuojing is confirmed? Chen Ming didn't know much about the 5th Legion, nor did he know the president's style of doing things, so he asked this question. The president's answer was very simple. It depends on luck. If you are lucky, it will be solved in about 5 minutes after the location is determined. If you are unlucky, then there may be psychics who have to sacrifice. Not everyone can survive the dimensional infection. Ended the communication with the president. Chen Ming had nothing to do for the time being, although he had fleets on standby in 4-star systems. But he couldn't risk being attacked by fleets from all sides of the star system and risking Zhuojing being driven crazy. He could only wait for the 5th Legion to respond, and then wait for the president to finish his work before giving a final conclusion. Chen Ming could notice that the fleets of the 5th Legion were constantly entering the 4-star systems. Even in hyperspace, more and more fleets of the 5th Legion were on standby at any time. The atmosphere in the 4-star systems was only one of killing. Time passed faster than Chen Ming thought. A few hours passed in the blink of an eye. Although the situation in a star system seemed to be on the verge of breaking out, there was no suitable time for this trigger. Both the 5th Legion and those fleets that dared to stay on the edge of the star system, and whose strength was gradually reduced due to the 5th Legion's fleet, seemed to be waiting for something. Chen Ming, he felt as if his spirit was being stretched to the limit while waiting, and it could be disconnected at any time. But at this moment, he suddenly noticed that the spaceship Enwupiing was riding on began to slow down, as if it was about to reach its destination. Through the cosmic environment around the spaceship, Chen Ming could confirm that although he was no longer in the 4 galaxies at this time, he was near the 4 galaxies. Zhuojing really couldn't send him to the most important place. At this time, he must be taken out as bait. Chen Ming had nothing to say. He controlled Enwupiing and picked up the terminal to watch silently. Even if it was not Chen Ming's own terminal, he could see some scattered news about the Kamo star region. However, these news were disappearing rapidly, and the Kamo star region was gradually becoming a world isolated from the outside world. Enwupiing's expression gradually became calm, but it seemed a little desperate. Through the monitoring, Chen Ming, who was spying on Enwupiing, also took out a terminal, contacted his old acquaintance, and said, "We are almost there," and Enwupiing seems to have given up. The terminal immediately responded, The recipient said he has used psychic power. Go and see him. Maybe there is a chance. Got it. Kiamiansen stood up and walked towards Nwupiang's room. Chen Ming was still flipping through the terminal at this time. After losing many sources of information, he was mainly looking at the evidence left by Qinmian before, as well as the various bounties flying around. Chen Ming even paid a bounty for Nwupiang himself. When Qinmian came in, he happened to see the bounty information displayed on the terminal in Nwupiang's hand. Qinmian did not directly test Nwupiang, but just said, "We are here, get ready to work. I hope you don't violate our cooperation regulations." Nwupiang also accepted his fate and asked, "What do you want me to do?" "Come out and see for yourself." When Chen Ming came to the open hatch of the spaceship, what can be seen outside is a space station. At this moment, their spaceship is parked at the port of the space station. When Chen Ming got off the spaceship, he could see that the entire port was empty, with only the spaceship he was on docked here. This is a space station similar to the Ecological Observation Space Station where he had stayed before in Zhujiang. If Chen Ming guessed correctly, there should also be a laboratory-like area at the deepest part of this space station. Chen Ming turned his head and looked at Qinmian, who was standing near the open hatch of the spaceship and did not get off, and asked, "Are you going to let me guard the door here?" "What else?" Sure enough, Qinmian's question confirmed Zhujiang's idea. They brought him here instead of the 4 galaxies, and they obviously used him as bait. There are definitely many clues here that seem to be related to the psychic of Zhujiang, but in fact they have nothing to do with it. This is normal. Zhujiang is not a fool, and it is impossible to put him in a really critical place. How could someone trust someone who had just joined and was forced to join after only half a month? But since the situation has become like this, he has to find a chance to leave. There is no chance here. For galaxies, where is the psychic in Zhujiang? Qinmian asked Nwupiang, "Isn't this what we agreed on before?" He took out an iron box from his pocket and threw it to Chen Ming. "Your medicine for the next half month." Chen Ming took the box steadily, opened it, and took a look and asked, "Aren't you giving it one day at a time this time?" "I still have things to do. Bringing you here is my last thing." "Where are you going?" "This is my business. It has nothing to do with you. You only need to protect this space station for 2 weeks, and we will give you all the medicine for 1 course of treatment, and then we will be even." Chen Ming felt a little uncomfortable after hearing this. Qinmian was still lying to him. "I think you want me to die here." Qinmian turned around and looked at the empty port without a single spaceship after hearing Chen Ming's doubts and said, "In 24 hours, there will be a spaceship for you to pick you up. If you can't stop it, retreat. At that time, I will send you directly to the base where we stayed before. I will leave the medicine there. If you're interested in joining us, wait for me there. If you are not interested, then so be it." Qinmian's words seemed to relax their needs. But at this moment, Chen Ming suddenly felt that the brain of the second Nwupiang that he replaced in his backpack was suddenly affected by psychic energy. Qinmian's words of invitation were quietly engraved in this brain by this psychic energy. If Chen Ming had not changed his brain and had not noticed it, he would probably really follow Qinmian's words and wait there to join Zhujiang. No matter how friendly Zhujiang looks, they are just pretending to be good people. In fact, they are still a cult organization, and there is nothing to say. Chen Ming shook his head and responded as if he hadn't noticed anything. He stood completely on the ground of the space station. Qinmian simply turned around and returned to the spaceship, closing the hatch. The spaceship set sail again. Chen Ming said nothing, but just watched the spaceship disappear in the port silently. After he refused the people from Zhujiang to arrange a place for him to stay, he stretched out his hand to the wall next to him and waited. Finally, after Qinmian's spaceship entered hyperspace, after confirming that the direction he was sailing was the 4 galaxies found by the president, Chen Ming suddenly muttered to himself, "Dare to let me guard the door here alone? All the laboratories are yours." Of course, he just said this. He was not interested in taking over Zhujiang's laboratories that needed to conduct a large number of human experiments. He still had to wait a little longer until he could thoroughly confirm which galaxy Zhujiang was in through Qinmian. So what he could do while waiting was to figure out what was going on in this space station. Zhujiang's purpose seems to be very clear at present, which is to delay time. It is a good idea to drag Chen Ming to a new star system instead of the 4-star systems to do protection work, which can prevent him from rebelling and causing trouble, and can also be used as bait to attract the attention of others. Then this space station is a trap with bait. However, Chen Ming feels that enwhooping alone is not enough as bait. Although it may be enough for Odin, it may not be enough for others. There should be other baits arranged on the space station, and there will be some real traps on the space station that can hurt those who come here. Anyway, since the security of the space station is now handed over to him, he must take the opportunity to control the space station, obtain intelligence, and understand Zhuo Jing's actions. Without the restrictions of psychics and without psychics blocking him, Chen Ming can easily occupy the entire space station, and there is no need to worry about being exposed. As his own psychic power spread to the entire space station, Chen Ming quickly analyzed the current situation of the space station in the database in the core area. In short, the core area of the space station is conducting research on the Mind Beast project that Chen Ming is very familiar with. It is planned to release it when a psychic comes. Since this is the case with this space station, Chen Ming estimates that the situation in the other places where Zhuo Jing left traces is the same. One of the other 4 galaxies really has a psychic from Zhuo Jing, and the other 3 should have been set up with baits and traps like this by Zhuo Jing. In addition, Chen Ming also noticed that there are 2 mind beasts set up by Zhuo Jing inside the space station: Bloodthirst and Despair. They are all extremely negative spirit stones, and they have certain conflicts with each other. The mind beasts created by these 2 spirit stones are isolated in 2 separate areas. Moreover, the spirit stones that are the source of the 2 mind beasts have been completely fleshed and bloody, and have completely merged with such monsters. Not only is it impossible to extract the spirit stones again, moreover, if the psychic coming here is not careful and has psychic equipment on his body, even without psychic equipment, there is a great possibility that the psychic will cause the mind to go berserk in the environment of the mind beast. Zhuo Jing had obviously spent a lot of money to assassinate the star domain leader before, and was prepared to be surrounded and suppressed by the empire. So now Chen Ming has reason to believe that Zhuo Jing also spent a lot of money when setting up the trap. There must be 2 such mind beasts in the space stations or colonies in other galaxies that are related to Zhuo Jing. Chen Ming immediately took out the terminal and reminded the boss. After all, the president is busy, and Chen Ming can't contact him for the time being. Then the only way to make the information obtained by enwhooping public without involving enwhooping and Chen Ming together is through the boss. Let the boss help spread it, and don't let people be fooled directly. After the boss received the news, the boss immediately sent a new message to Chen Ming. The content is a rumor that enwhooping and Hu-Yi appeared near several focal star systems in Kamo Star region. This confirms Chen Ming's guess. Because in the public eye, Hu-Yi and enwhooping both cooperated with Zhuo Jing, and the places where they appeared meant that Zhuo Jing's psychic was likely in these places. In short, there are 2 more star systems suspected of being related to Zhuo Jing. It is clear that Zhuo Jing is trying to divert the people who surrounded them. See the boss's message. This rumor has begun to be believed. Some fleets in other places, or fleets forced back by the 5th Legion, who think they can pick up leaks, have already begun to move towards enwhooping or Hu-Yi. Even the 5th Legion could not be completely sure that the news was false. They had to find a way to ensure the safety of the star field. They had to take a look at these 2 places. Knowing this news, Chen Ming had no way to solve this problem. After all, Zhuo Jing was arranging his means in an open conspiracy. They put everything on the surface, so that people knew there was a problem and it might be a trap, but they had to go. At the same time, they also released various tempting things to attract those who already had this little idea. Zhuo Jing can gamble, but people who have to guard against Zhuo Jing dare not gamble. But at least the president can help. It seems that the president is still unreachable. He said before that there were important things to do, and it is normal that he can't be contacted now. But the 5th Legion should also need the president now, right? Without the president, who has experienced dimensional infection, as a staff officer, will the 5th Legion have problems? It's hard to say. The president should have considered the question he was thinking about now, so Chen Ming didn't think much about it and asked the boss another question. What is Hui doing? How did Zhuo Jing also use him as a scapegoat? Didn't I tell you before? I wanted him to get some information out of Zhuojing, but he couldn't do it. So I can only let him take the initiative to run over and pretend to help Zhuojing, and then actually stab Zhuojing in the back and find a way to clean up for him. Anyway, I won't take care of him for the time being and see what he does later. What about you? What are you going to do? Chen Ming had already thought about what to do and immediately said, deal with the space station first and then wait. Wait for what? Wait for Zhuojing to expose their location. The communication ended. Chen Ming, who had been standing at the port, suddenly turned around. He ignored Zhuojing, who wanted to guide him, and walked straight to the core area of the space station. At the moment he turned around, the space station's external communication signals had been completely blocked. Under the premise that all the Zhuojings in the entire space station were on the death list, he no longer needed to completely hide his spiritual power. Anyway, on the Zhuojing space station, at this special time, only Zhuojing was qualified to access the external communication equipment. Even if some ordinary people who Chen Ming would not do anything about found problems, he would just slightly modify the equipment here. With what he had done on the ecological observation space station before, no one would question his ability in electronic technology. Chen Ming had already thought of the follow-up solution and continued to move towards the core area. Zhuojing could never have thought that their immediate boss Qian Mian would not bring them help to guard the space station, but a killer who wanted their lives. Although he knew that An Wuping was a person arranged by Qian Mian. But the order they had received before was to protect the space station until a hostile psychic arrived and released the two monsters in the core area of the space station. So Chen Ming's direct entry into the core area was naturally blocked by Zhuojing's armed forces. As for the blocking effect, it can only be said that it is not as good as the original ecological observation space station. After entering the insect state, Chen Ming easily killed a large number of Zhuojing and came to the isolation layer of the core area without any obstacles. The people in the core area that was isolated from inside and outside finally noticed something was wrong and wanted to release the mind beasts that should have been released when there was an invasion by foreign enemies. But just when they wanted to do this, Chen Ming had already broken into the core area and arrived at the gate of the area that contained the mind beasts faster than them. Chen Ming directly and violently tore open the gate that imprisoned Bloodthirsty. The bloodthirsty mind beast inside seemed to be a little excited when the gate was destroyed. But then, Chen Ming walked in and gave a heavy punch to the meat mountain-like mind beast that was trying to spread out. The fist that could fight against large weapons crushed the bloodthirsty mind beast into meat paste with the impact force. The exploded flesh and blood, covering the entire isolation room, no longer had any vitality. Only some scraps that were not hit were still lingering. However, the mind beast lost its main body, and the remaining mind beasts that were not completely crushed could not survive for a long time. However, just in case, Chen Ming still threw a small ball of plasma into the isolation area. Then he screwed the door that he had just violently torn open back together and closed the isolation area again. When the door was cracked by the impact, the mind beast was completely dead. At this time in the monitoring room, the researcher's Zhuojing, who was holding the joystick of the isolation room door, was stunned. He swallowed his saliva and looked at the other joystick, hesitating and not daring to pull it down. If he didn't pull it, Chen Ming wouldn't wait. The black big guy in the insect form once again violently inserted his hands into the gap between the metal door of the isolation room and tore the door open again. This time, the desperate beast inside did not expand outward like the bloodthirsty beast, but huddled in the corner of the isolation room. For a moment, Chen Ming seemed to feel a trace of fear from the desperate beast. But he didn't have time to feel it carefully, because when he saw this disgusting thing, Chen Ming had already punched it. After a muffled sound came out of the isolation room of the desperate beast again. Chen Ming planned the route and started from the core area of the space station as before, and cleaned up the Zhuojing space station thoroughly. Half an hour passed quickly. There were only 3 living people left on the entire Zhuojing space station. One was Chen Ming, and the remaining 2 were ordinary people who survived the previous chaos. Chen Ming ignored them, because just after he dealt with all the Zhuojing in the Zhuojing space station, he found that the spaceship that Chen Ming was riding had arrived near the hyperspace of the Lucy Galaxy at this time. and the spaceship was constantly approaching the edge of the hyperspace station in the Lucy galaxy. Just as the spaceship in front was about to enter the sensor detection range of the 5th Legion fleet stationed in hyperspace, the entire spaceship was shrouded in a black fog. None of the ships of the fleet stationed here noticed the spaceship in the black fog. Chen Ming's spaceship activated the hyperspace channel system in front of the fleet and entered the normal universe. Even the aftermath of the activation of the hyperspace channel system was hidden in it under the cover of the black fog. Chen Ming's spaceship quickly left the hyperspace. It can be seen that in the normal universe environment, there are also a large number of fleets surrounding the entire galaxy. And at this time, the number of fleets gathered by the 5th Legion was enough to plow all the planets, colonies, and space stations in the entire galaxy. But just like hyperspace, under the cover of black fog, no spaceship could detect the trace of Chen Ming. Even the Yuhui fleet left by Chen Ming here was the same. The unknown of the Chen Ming spaceship on the sensor was only pitch black. Nothing could be seen. Nothing could be detected. In fact, Chen Ming could directly point this out at this time and react to the commander of the 5th Legion here. Presumably, the commander would not mind a small request made by Chen Ming, a psychic who helped the 5th Legion a lot. But Chen Ming felt that doing so seemed to lead to some serious consequences, so he let him enter the galaxy. This time, Chen Ming's spaceship was not docked at a space station, but at the industrial planet called Yunluoxing in this galaxy. The spaceship landed on the planet quickly. When Chen Ming got off the spaceship, in front of him was the towering geocentric furnace power tower. When seeing this scene, Chen Ming finally couldn't help whispering, "I found you. Waiting is rewarding after all." Chen Ming walked straight into the geocentric furnace power tower under maintenance. Obviously, the psychic on the left side was in this geocentric furnace power tower. The moment he walked into the maintenance station, Chen Ming suddenly found that his perception of the cloaked man was clear for a moment. In the Lucy galaxy, on the industrial planet deep underground in this geocentric furnace power tower, the perception was clear for a moment, but in the next moment, the iron atoms he left on the cloaked man disappeared completely, as if they were directly erased. And at the moment when the iron atoms disappeared for unknown reasons, at the edge of the galaxy wherein Whooping was, the fire of weapons suddenly broke out inside the fleets of the 5th Legion. It was the fleet of the 5th Legion attacking its own people. Chen Ming's fleet was also attacked by stray bullets or weapons from a certain spacecraft. Bad things still happened. Chen Ming ordered all the Afterglow fleets in the 4 galaxies to leave the battlefield and evacuate the edge of the galaxy. Let the 5th Legion solve the civil war problem caused by the influence of Zhuojiang psychics. In front of Zhuojiang psychics, such things are unavoidable. Chen Ming saw that spaceships were constantly destroyed and exploded, and soldiers of the 5th Legion were constantly dying under the guns of their own people. But he could only sigh helplessly, "It's time to leave." Chen Ming came to the edge of the space station. Half squatting on the ground, he made a gesture of exerting force. I saw that the space station was shattered by nearly a quarter as usual, and Chen Ming, in his insect form, flew to the edge of the galaxy at a terrifying speed. At this time, there were already many fleets of people who knew the news and wanted to come to pick up the leak at the edge of the galaxy wherein Whooping was. It seems that after Zhuojiang found out that the boss had announced that they had left the finished product of the Mind Beast in the space station, he also took the initiative to verify that the news was correct. It is clear that the finished product of the Mind Beast was also used as part of the bait. But this bait is really effective. For most forces that cannot directly intervene in the battles of the 4 galaxies, it is not a loss even if they can only pick up the finished products of the Mind Beast. Then they started fighting. Without the large-scale and organized fleet of the 5th Legion to maintain peace, it is normal for them to fight each other even if they are not affected by the left-path psychics. Chen Ming was too lazy to care about them. Greedy people will sooner or later be destroyed by their greed. With the help of the high speed of the space station, Chen Ming quickly approached the edge of the galaxy, and the hyperspace stabilizing connective tissue on the Queen's biomass spacecraft in his body was triggered. After a brief feeling of hysteresis, he entered the hyperspace in his physical body. Here, like the information edge of the normal universe, a big melee is taking place. Chen Ming does not plan to stay near the battlefield. After all, the activation of the biological version of the hyperspace channel jump engine is the same as the ordinary hyperspace channel jump engine fed to the Queen, which requires a calm environment. Chen Ming looked around privately and found the wreckage of a spaceship floating towards him. He approached the biomass nozzle and planned to use the force to leave. But in hyperspace, because the environment is proportionally smaller than the normal universe, Chen Ming just moved again, and the spaceship sensor immediately scanned Whooping's existence. Although many people know their own weight, it is impossible to provoke someone like Whooping who enters hyperspace in the flesh. But there are also some people who think they are capable and know Whooping's identity. They have some unnecessary thoughts about the sky-high reward hanging on Whooping's head after the assassination. But Chen Ming would throw a plasma spear directly at any blind person. Let them experience the same fate as Wujing. After 2 plasma spears killed 2 blind psychics and annihilated dozens of densely arranged warships in hyperspace, Chen Ming left the edge of the battlefield unimpeded. In front of all the people fighting there, he started the biomass hyperspace channel jump engine and disappeared in hyperspace, jumped towards the direction of the Lucy galaxy. During the short process of jump, Chen Ming suddenly thought, since he could jump physically, does this mean that he also has spatial ability? Accompanied by strange thoughts in his mind. Soon, the appearance of the Lucy galaxy appeared in front of Chen Ming. But at this moment, the ear of his original body suddenly heard the news from the boss. The control of the Stargate of the Kamo starfield was seized by someone in the sudden rebellion of the 5th Legion. The Stargate is a fixed means of long-distance, large-scale fleet transportation within the Empire. And such a giant structure was seized at this special time. It can't be said that someone seized it in order to evacuate the people of Kamo Star region from this dangerous place, right? It is also impossible to let Wujing, who had already hidden in the Lucy star system, retreat under the Earth core furnace power tower of Yunluo star. After all, the Stargate is in Kamo. Then there is only one reason for the Stargate to be seized. Someone wants to use the Stargate to come to Kamo. After Chen Ming learned the news, he immediately contacted his Yue fleet. He has a total of 300 spaceships in Kamo, divided into 4 fleets of 75 spaceships each, staying outside 4-star systems. Now, since he has confirmed that Wujing's people are actually in the Lucy star system, there is no need for the Yue fleet in the other 3-star systems to continue to stay there. At the same time, he does not need to continue to pay attention to the progress of the 5th Legion's civil war. These are things that the 5th Legion should solve on its own. So Chen Ming gave the order at this time, and the Yue fleet of the 2 galaxies closer to Lucy and the other 3 galaxies went directly to Lucy and prepared to assist. The remaining fleet immediately used the hyperspace channel jump engine to go to the location of the Kamo 1 Stargate. The news of the Stargate being captured came from the boss. But the boss only said this news and did not explain the more precise content. Obviously, the boss also obtained the information through his subordinates or other sources of information. If he really needs accurate first-hand information, he can only investigate it through himself. While the fleet is going, Chen Ming also dealt with Whooping's affairs at the same time. When he received the boss's news, it happened to be the time when Whooping jumped directly from the neighboring galaxy to the Lucy galaxy by hyperspace jump. At this moment, Whooping, who was in the space at the edge of the galaxy, could clearly see the large number of spacecraft wreckage nearby. Obviously, there had just been a war here. According to the situation of the surviving spacecraft and the content recorded by Chen Ming's Yue fleet further away, the situation here has gradually become clear. At the beginning of the chaos of the previous civil war, the 5th Legion cleared all the spacecraft that did not belong to the 5th Legion camp at the first time with an absolute numerical advantage. Only Chen Ming's Yue fleet was too iconic, and it avoided the main battlefield at the first time and escaped. Even just now, whenever a 5th Legion spacecraft took the initiative to attack his fleet, it would immediately be counterattacked by other 5th Legion fleets. After all, Chen Ming came to cooperate with the 5th Legion at the request of the president to help the 5th Legion deal with some things that it had not dealt with in time. A good man. Whoever attacks Chen Ming must have a problem with his brain, and of course it is easier to become a target for others. So even if Chen Ming's Yue fleet did nothing, it was considered to have made some contributions. While most people were obviously still sensible, those in the 5th Legion who were not affected by the left path psychic quickly controlled the situation after the battle. After all, under normal circumstances, it is very likely that only a part of the people on a spaceship are affected. As for those who are not affected, as long as they are affected, they only need to tie up or solve the affected commander. At least in the Lucy Galaxy, the fleet of the 5th Legion won the final victory and stabilized Lucy. However, in the chaos just now, some people took advantage of the 5th Legion's lack of time to take care of too much and took advantage of the chaos to pass through the 5th Legion's blockade, enter the galaxy, and go to all the colonies and space stations in the galaxy where people exist. Such a situation will definitely stimulate Zhujiang, so the 5th Legion had to send people to various places in the galaxy just now. Since the specific location of Zhujiang cannot be determined, a comprehensive investigation will be carried out directly. Now, some people should have landed on Yunluo Star. I don't know if they will find Zhujiang hidden under the Earth core furnace power tower. If there are people controlled by Zhujiang among these people, then I am afraid that many of these people will go to Yunluo to block those who may find Zhujiang. Just when Chen Ming analyzed what happened just now through Wuping's perspective, he also noticed that the 5th Army had begun to reorganize the galaxy's defense line and was preparing to blockade the galaxy again. With the civil war just now, most of the people affected by Zhujiang were restricted. Then the next blockade will definitely turn this galaxy into a complete blockade. And in Wuping's current identity is not suitable for him to appear in front of the 5th Army openly. There is no other way. Chen Ming did not hesitate too much and directly crushed the last black mist heart gathering spirit bead he got from Chen Yan. With the help of the shadow of the 5th Army's fleet, Chen Ming successfully entered the interior of the galaxy and began to approach Yunluo Star. At the same time, in the core of the Kamo Star region, Kamo, 1-star region, the fleet sent by Chen Ming finally arrived at the edge of the galaxy where the Stargate is located. Even outside the galaxy, Chen Ming can see through the sensor that in the center of the huge Stargate device located inside the galaxy, there is a layer of film that looks a bit illusory, like a mirror slowly filling inside the Stargate. This is the external manifestation of the Stargate being activated. It seems that the people stationed at the Stargate not only lost, but also had no time to cut off the power and block the Stargate. Under normal circumstances, it takes a long time to power off and restart the AI Stargate, but if it is just a Stargate in standby mode, it can be started at any time. Around the Stargate that is being activated, there is a mixed fleet that looks a bit chaotic. Not only are there fleets of various forces, but even the fleet of the 5th Corps, which should have driven away these forces, is also mixed in. It seems that when the 5th Corps was stationed here, chaos happened to break out internally. Perhaps they themselves could suppress the chaos like the 5th Legion in the Lucy Galaxy. But obviously when they wanted to do so, those forces that were driven away in the other 4 star systems came to make trouble. In the end, the 5th Legion suffered heavy losses and had to evacuate in a hurry, and the control of the Stargate was completely seized. The 5th Legion here failed. Sure enough, many of the people from other forces that had gathered near the 5th Legion before were also influenced by Zhujiang. Otherwise, they would not have come to such a place to make trouble after giving up the idea of the 4 star systems where the 5th Legion had gathered. It was reasonable for them to snatch the psychics of Zhujiang or the psychic beasts released by Zhujiang from the 5th Legion. But using violent means to seize a Stargate that had nothing to do with Zhujiang was of no benefit to those people. Moreover, after ending the attack on the 5th Legion, they gathered together and jointly guarded the vicinity of the Stargate. This situation made Chen Ming completely certain of how great the influence of Zhujiang's brainwashed psychics was. However, Chen Ming is now watching the situation in the galaxy from a distance, and no one influenced by Zhujiang's psychic comes out to stop him. People influenced by Zhujiang don't seem to care that someone is staying at the edge of the galaxy. Because in addition to Chen Ming's fleet, there are actually many other spaceships at the edge of the galaxy. It was someone on one of these spaceships who provided the boss with information here. And those who were brainwashed by Zhujiang obviously only care about the situation of the Stargate. They have to wait for the Stargate to be completely open to welcome the people behind the Stargate. Chen Ming has only come into contact with some information about the Stargate on paper, so there is really no way to prevent such a situation from happening at this time. Anyway, it is impossible to fight. Although the fleet here is mixed, there are at least nearly 60 cruisers and more destroyers and escorts. Fortunately, there are no capital ships here, otherwise Chen Ming's fleet would have to run away as soon as it came. But even if there were only cruisers, he couldn't come out and cause trouble in front of so many cruisers. Although Chen Ming has the ability to build cruisers, he has not moved the number of cruisers he has on hand, and has only kept 12 cruisers, which is enough for him. One reason is that the cost of building cruisers is too high, and the other reason is that no one in Yuhui can drive the cruisers that are built. Even if we count the individuals with strong consciousness born in the hive mind network of the mechanical race during this period, Chen Ming can control 9 cruisers himself, as well as the alpha-class Yue on Chen Ming's hand. Chen Ming can only make more than 20 cruisers that can be driven in a short period of time. It can fight with the fleet on the Stargate side, but there will definitely be losses. These more than 60 cruisers are enough to focus fire and directly destroy his cruisers before his repair psychic power takes effect. And if he really wants to fight, he has to jump back the cruisers continuously. Let's not talk about whether his mental power is enough to build more than a dozen cruisers and then jump back a total of more than 20 cruisers from abroad. Let's just say that the current situation is purely caused by the Fifth Army's inability to resist, and he will not help the Fifth Army clean up its mess. It's not the boss of Baiquan, the old factory director Wu and others. So Chen Ming still plans to continue to watch from Kamo 1. See the subsequent movements of Zhuajing. Who are they going to send here by occupying this place? While Chen Ming's Yuhui fleet in Kamo 1 was waiting for the Stargate of Zhuajing to move, and Wuping, who was also controlled by Chen Ming in the Lucy Galaxy, finally approached Yunluo Star. This is a planet that looks almost pure white from the outside. The climate of the entire planet is relatively cold. It snows for most of the revolution cycle. Of course, this planet can still be considered a habitable planet. It is precisely this climate of snowing for most of the year that gave this planet the name Yunluo. However, although it is snowing in most areas of the planet, there is no such situation near the Earth core furnace power tower, the most important industrial building on this planet. The large amount of heat brought by the Earth core furnace power tower has already affected the nearby climate in a macro sense. So when it snows in other places, it only rains near the power tower. In the drizzle, with the last bit of spiritual energy effect given by the black mist heart-gathering spirit bead that he just crushed, and Wuping arrived at the industrial area near the Earth core furnace power tower. Stepping out of the shadows, he appeared near the warehouse not far from the power tower. Chen Ming could sense some spiritual energy fluctuations from various locations in the industrial area at this time. Obviously, there are other psychics who have come here, and it is unknown whether they are enemies or friends. However, apart from the psychic outside, he did not find the psychic fluctuations of the cloaked man called the recipient in Zhuajing. But Chen Ming was sure that he was under the power tower of the Earth core furnace not far away. Chen Ming identified the direction and stepped out. However, before he took a few steps, he suddenly heard a subtle scream that was immediately cut off. He turned his head and saw a middle-aged woman in her 40s wearing work clothes next to a nearby warehouse. She was holding a large bag full of food in her hand, covering her mouth, and her eyes were full of fear. Chen Ming was used to seeing such eyes. After confirming that this middle-aged woman was not a psychic, nor was she someone in charge of surveillance, Chen Ming withdrew from the insect form, revealing the appearance of a normal person, and waved to her to leave quickly. After the middle-aged woman covered her mouth and nodded frantically and walked away quickly, Chen Ming also entered the insect form again and ignored her. But he still felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Because there are still ordinary people here? Chen Ming sighed. He could only sigh. Because he had no way to solve this problem. No one on this planet could be evacuated. Zhuajing's threat had spread to the entire empire. No one dared to bet that if they evacuated the civilians on the planet, there would be important people from Zhuajing among them. What's more, the population of an industrial colony in a prosperous star field could not be evacuated in a day or two. All the governors of these planets could do was to let all the people stay at home, rely on government assistance, and wait for the incident to be resolved. Zhuajing probably knew this and chose to carry out the final stage in such a place. Chen Ming could only silently wish her good luck in his heart. At the same time, he continued to step out and walk towards the energy tower. Just as Chen Ming arrived at the surface of the planet, deep underground of the Earth core furnace energy tower, in an empty area, Chimyan leaned against the support column. Next to him was the person who had been in contact with him. He was also wrapped in a cloak, making it difficult to see his specific appearance. In the center of this area, the cloaked man, or the recipient, was sitting there quietly. Chimyan rubbed his eyes, which were a little dry from staring at the front for too long. When he raised his head, he suddenly found that the cloak on the recipient was torn. A creature with a human upper body and twisted flesh and blood in the lower body appeared in front of him. Don't worry. The person next to Chimyan comforted Chimyan and said, "He is evolving. He is receiving the body given by God." The upper body of the recipient also broke as the voice fell, and a large amount of flesh and blood spilled out, leaving only a head that was quickly submerged in the surging flesh and blood. A unique psychic wave that could not be detected by ordinary psychics emerged from its body and spread to the entire planet. "You go upstairs, someone is coming outside." Chimyan nodded, turned around, and took the elevator. At this time, Chen Ming just stepped into the interior of the Earth core furnace power tower, a slightly messy but not too spacious hall. As soon as he came in, he felt an extremely obvious spiritual energy fluctuation suddenly appearing deep underground. An unprecedented greedy emotion that seemed to come from his heart suddenly enveloped him. The familiarity of this spiritual energy fluctuation was obviously released by Zhuijing's recipient. Are they not going to pretend? Chen Ming continued to walk into the interior of the power tower with doubts. His spiritual energy has covered the power tower with his arrival. He can now directly destroy the entire Earth core furnace power tower. However, the collapsed power tower may not necessarily kill Zhuijing below. So Chen Ming still planned to go down and kill Chimyan and the recipient Chimyan mentioned. He had the ability. Chen Ming was just thinking about dealing with Zhuijing below. Suddenly, a sound of breaking through the air came from behind him. Chen Ming did not feel any danger, so he simply turned around on the spot. A translucent claw suddenly tore across Chen Ming's face. However, the claw did not leave any trace on Chen Ming's dark shell. After the claw scratched, a half-human, half-beast guy was gradually transforming from translucent to a real appearance. From the psychic fluctuations on his body, it can be clearly distinguished that this guy is also a psychic, and a psychic of the physical mutation type. And the direction of his physical mutation happened to be a creature that Chen Ming knew, the night owl. A creature that survives on a planet located underground in that special ecosystem. This creature relies on darkness to sneak attack its prey. When such an ability is manifested in a psychic, it becomes the ability to hide one's breath to a considerable extent. Chen Ming really didn't notice his existence at the first time when he couldn't sense the danger. Unfortunately, the ability of this psychic is still too weak. The night owl psychic also found that his attack was completely meaningless to Whooping. He just wanted to retreat, but Chen Ming had already commented on this guy in his mind, stretched out his arm and grabbed his head and crushed it directly. He didn't have time to capture these psychics now. Chen Ming shook off the blood on his hand and looked to the side. He had heard the movement of the elevator next to him from just now. Just when Chen Ming turned his head, he happened to see Chimyan taking the elevator to the ground floor of the Earth core furnace power tower. At the moment the elevator door opened, Chimyan showed a not surprised expression on his face and said, "It's you?" As expected, you have been a complete spy from the beginning. Just as Chimyan's words fell, Chen Ming had already disappeared from the spot, punching the elevator that Chimyan was riding. However, Chimyan immediately turned into black mist to avoid this violent attack. The air created by Chen Ming's punch formed a fist wind under the force of the force, and it could only hit the elevator and the wall next to it. The wall of the Earth core furnace energy tower, which was strong enough to support its huge weight, had obvious cracks, and it looked like it could collapse at any time. Chen Ming looked around at the complex environment full of shadows and asked Chimyan the same question. "At the beginning? How can you be sure that I was a spy at the beginning?" Chen Min's voice came from the shadows. Because only you can spread the news that there are two mind beasts on the space station. Chen Ming punched again in the direction where the voice came from and completely cleared all obstacles in front of his fist. After confirming that the punch missed, Chen Ming asked again, "Why don't you doubt who E? Isn't there someone else besides me in the news you released? He doesn't have the brains or the ability, so you are the only one left. Since you know everything, can you just die?" After saying the word die, Chen Ming also confirmed Chen Min's position through his mental perception. Plasma wrapped around his fist, and a simple punch hit Chen Min's position again. A violent explosion occurred at the location where his fist hit. An almost pure, clear, and transparent ice appeared in front of Chen Min, blocking Chen Ming's punch and the impact of the fist explosion. Chen Min stood behind the ice, his eyes locked on Whooping. Chen Min was silent, and Chen Ming spoke again. "I am curious, as a psychic, besides copying other people's psychic power, do you have your own psychic power that can be used for combat? You will know soon." As soon as Chen Min finished speaking, Chen Ming discovered that his psychic power fluctuations were leaking. Leaking in the direction of Chen Min in front of him, Chen Min was absorbing this spiritual energy fluctuation and converting it into his own ability. Chen Ming's eyes once again flashed with confusion about Chen Min's ability to extract such spiritual energy effects. However, he did not hesitate and broke the ice with a full punch. When Chen Min once again turned into black mist and disappeared in the hall, a ball of plasma condensed in his palm and was thrown directly to his feet. The blazing white light instantly enveloped the entire hall. The explosion of plasma pierced through the ceiling, the ground, and several walls. The space of the 3 floors above the ground and the 3 floors underground was completely opened up, and all the debris was cleared away. The glow of plasma continued to wrap around Chen Ming's arm, completely illuminating Chen Ming's side. The effect of black mist spiritual energy will be greatly reduced in a strong light environment. Chen Min's position appeared in Chen Ming's perception. The movement of the battle under the Earth core furnace power tower naturally attracted the attention of many people. And that completely undisguised psychic fluctuation was enough to attract the attention of all psychics on Yunluo Star. Several psychics that Chen Ming had discovered in the industrial zone immediately began to move towards the power supply tower. Of course, some people also told others that there were people fighting in the power supply tower. And the special psychic fluctuation that just came from the recipient deep underground also aroused the greed in the hearts of all the psychics who came over. Everyone was affected, but the difference was whether it was serious or not. In the destroyed space of the Earth core furnace power tower, after the glow of the plasma completely illuminated the surroundings, Chen Ming finally found Chen Min, who had been hiding with the black fog psychic energy. At this time, Chen Min had completely entered the insect form by relying on the stolen psychic energy of Whooping. And from the appearance, there was almost no difference from Whooping's insect form, and even in terms of body size, it was about half a meter taller. The psychic energy stolen by Chen Min sometimes played a stronger role in his hands than the original owner. But Whooping's psychic energy was obviously an exception. Chen Ming specifically reduced the size of Whooping's insect form to this extent, but if the size was enlarged, it would not have an advantage in front of him. But Chen Min's understanding of Whooping was obviously not deep enough. After absorbing a large amount of psychic energy fluctuations and completely entering the insect state, he directly imitated Chen Ming's usual fighting habits of controlling Whooping, rushed to Chen Ming's front very arrogantly, and threw a punch. Chen Ming certainly didn't want to give in, and he threw a punch in the face. Neither side took any precautions, only a simple and rough punch went straight to the enemy's face. Chen Ming's head shook slightly under Chen Min's punch. Chen Min's carapace was shattered by the impact the moment Chen Ming's fist hit him, and he flew backwards and hit the wall of the Earth core furnace energy tower. The terrifying impact of this punch also caused the surrounding walls to crack, and the walls of nearly 10 floors collapsed under the impact of Chen Min being knocked away. Ah! This was the thought that appeared in the minds of Chen Ming and Chen Min at the same time. Chen Ming had never expected that Chen Min's insect form looked comparable to Whooping, but in fact it would be so weak. This didn't seem to be because of Chen Min's use of psychic energy, but because there was something wrong with the psychic energy that Chen Min obtained. Although Chen really got the spiritual energy of Whooping, which he didn't know what it was, when he used it, he was obviously not up to the standard of the Queen's spiritual energy. You should know that the main source of Whooping's physical strength, in addition to the Zerg genes, is the Queen's spiritual energy. Chen current situation is obviously purely due to his appearance and some abilities, and the power from the Queen's spiritual energy is not high. This eventually led to the current situation. Chen Ming is now increasingly confused about whether it is Chen problem or Whooping's problem. On the other side, Chen, who was knocked away by a punch, smashed the wall, and crashed into the industrial zone, was also stunned. He couldn't understand why he clearly absorbed Whooping's spiritual energy fluctuations, and when he replicated the spiritual energy, he also followed Whooping's spiritual energy fluctuations completely, but in the end, when he fought with Whooping, he couldn't get out of a round? Why? Chen mind was full of doubts. But he could feel that the injury caused by the punch just now was recovering rapidly under the effect of Whooping's spiritual energy. Obviously, the psychic energy he copied should be fine. Why is this happening? Whooping. Someone's voice suddenly sounded not far behind Chen. He turned his head immediately after hearing this, and saw a psychic who heard the noise of their fight just now and came to pick up the leak. He was staring at Chen, whose carapace was broken and a lot of gray-green blood was flowing. The name called out by this psychic immediately attracted all the psychics hiding in the industrial zone. Although there are many psychics on this planet who are trying to take advantage of the situation, there are definitely psychics from the 5th Legion, the local government, and even the Empire. They are all scattered far away on the tops of various industrial buildings and did not approach rashly. However, the psychic in front of him has obviously become greedy. Seeing the seriously injured Chen and thinking of the high bounty hanging on Whooping's head, he finally couldn't help it. The psychic wave entangled his body and wanted to attack Chen. Chen didn't give in. He climbed up despite the serious injuries on his body. Before the psychic, who had no idea of his own strength, could react, he tore his throat with one claw and smashed his head with one punch. Feeling the power in his body, Chen moved a little, and the broken shell on his body quickly recovered with the blessing of psychic energy. He could use Whooping's power to easily kill other psychics, but this power seemed so pale and powerless when facing Whooping. Chen exhaled. He decided to give up Whooping's seemingly good psychic power, leaving only the super speed recovery ability he needed, and the rest. After all, the battle still depends on oneself. He turned around again and looked in the direction of the Earth core furnace power tower. The smoke and dust from the collapsed building over there was rapidly dissipating in the rain. The gap more than 10 stories high soon appeared clearly in front of everyone. Although the Earth core furnace power tower lost these structures, it did not shake at all, and there was no sign of collapse at all, which was enough to show how strong this building was. The psychic inside was definitely not easy to deal with, as it could destroy such a building so seriously. Who was that psychic? Such questions did frighten some psychics who wanted to fish in troubled waters. But there was no way to completely stop the greed in everyone's heart. The psychics who were already occupied by greed would at most hesitate because of this situation. Soon, a black shadow walked from the shadow inside the power tower to the edge of the collapsed wall. A psychic who was hiding somewhere suddenly made a sound that everyone present could hear. That person is also Whooping? Also Whooping? Then the one below? One of the Whoopings is fake. That means no one else knew what the psychic outside was thinking. Anyway, Chen and Chen Ming, who were the focus of the psychics on Yanluo Star at this time, didn't care about the outside eyes. The fact that the people around didn't come over immediately proved that they were not capable enough to participate in this battle. The two of them were the strongest on the battlefield. Chen waited until his injuries were completely healed, and then he turned into black mist again and disappeared near the ground where he fell and entered the energy supply tower. And his action also confirmed one thing for the people around him, that is, the Whooping who was knocked out was fake and was a disguised existence of Zhuojing's psychic. The news that two Whoopings, one real and one fake, appeared at the same time quickly spread through the psychics who were watching. And then inside the energy supply tower, the sound of fighting broke out again. Chen Ming had recovered from the insect form to a normal human form. He relied on the changeable psychic energy to constantly test Chen Ming, trying to find out the foundation of Chen Ming's combat ability. As the psychic energy fluctuations with various effects were constantly used on Chen Ming, he also gradually found the most appropriate means to deal with Enwupiing. As a psychic who can copy the psychic effects of other psychics, Chen Ming can naturally use multiple psychic effects at the same time. The upper limit of the number of psychic powers that he can use without restriction and without becoming a psychotic entity is 4. And he gradually found the 4 most suitable psychics to deal with Enwupiing. Chen Ming's most commonly used black fog, clear ice that is enough to withstand the power of Chen Ming's punch. The virtual psychic that became a psychotic entity before. And the high-speed recovery psychic effect in human form obtained from Enwupiing. 4 psychics gathered in one person. Even if Chen Ming's power is enough to destroy the cruiser, there is no way to immediately solve Chen Ming, who has the triple life-saving skills of black fog, virtualization, and high-speed recovery. In addition, Chen Ming has been relying on the complex environment inside the Earth core furnace energy tower to pull with Chen Ming. He absolutely did not fight head-on, but relied on the sharpness of the ice to occasionally rush out from the dark to attack Chen Ming. Although he would not care if he pierced Enwupiing's fatal parts directly, or even cut off his fatal organs such as the brain and heart. But he had no way to deal with Chen Ming and could not catch him at all. Even if Chen Ming could occasionally react and barely touch Chen Ming with his fist wind, Chen Ming's injuries would soon recover, and then he would continue to look for opportunities to stab Chen Ming. Like a fly, disgusting, but unable to be killed. Chen Ming frowned and relied on the biomass jet to float in the center of a huge space that he had destroyed under the power tower of the Earth's core furnace. The glow of plasma appeared on his fist again. He actually didn't want to release the plasma directly now, because if the power tower on the surface collapsed, it would be more troublesome for him to go deep underground later. But Chen Ming's current movement really made him quite uncomfortable, and he could only try another ancient method while taking out the plasma. Chen Ming suddenly said to the people around him, "I heard that at the beginning, it seemed that your psychic with brainwashing ability killed a person affected by his psychic power. What a coincidence. The person you killed just died in front of one of your mortal enemies. I remember his name was Chen Ming, right? He died in front of him. Then your existence was exposed. Your plan of dimensional infection and trying every means to hide yourself in the Kamo Star region was directly ruined, and you were forced to become what you are now." Chen Ming, who was hiding in the dark corner, had a dark face and did not reply. "I am very curious about one thing. Are you mocking Chen Ming? Are you afraid that he will forget you?" Chen Ming's eyes swept around, but Chen Ming was still very calm and was not affected by Enwupiing's words. He continued to lurk in the shadows, ready to rely on the combination of virtualization and black fog psychic energy to give Chen Ming a hard blow. At this moment, Chen Ming suddenly heard noisy and dense movements coming from the outside of the power supply tower, and the psychics outside seemed to have a conflict. Chen Ming frowned slightly, because at present, the situation outside will only become more and more chaotic. The time he solved with Jing was the time when the chaos ended. It would be better for Chen Ming to die here quickly. Chen Ming didn't think about it anymore and patted his chest with his hand. In addition to Enwupiing's heart, there is another thing here. The source of chaos. Chen Ming's psychic energy is weird and diverse. Then Chen Ming can also use the effects brought by the source of chaos to counter Chen Ming. Infatuation, ruthlessness, electromagnetic force, virtualization, and the psychic energy of the Queen of Insects are all stored in this source of chaos. Infatuation, ruthlessness, and the psychic power of the Queen of Insects are of no use to Chen Ming, but electromagnetic force and virtualization are not among them. As the chaos core is stimulated, relying on the effect of previous training, Chen Ming has penetrated the electromagnetic force into his own biological magnetic field. A force from the magnetic field constantly stimulates Enwupiing's body, constantly expanding the power from the organism itself. And the ability to sense the magnetic field brought by this psychic power also allows Chen Ming to directly lock Chen Ming, who is in a virtual state in the black fog. Just wait for Chen Ming to leave the virtual state. No matter how Chen Ming uses the black fog to transfer, he can't get rid of Chen Ming's tracking. Chen Min's sixth sense of psychic is stimulating him, allowing him to feel the fear from the origin of psychic power and the fear of the unknown situation that Chen Ming can use a new power. He can see a lot of puzzles from Enwupiing, including what Enwupiing's identity is, why psychic power can't be completely replicated, and now this electromagnetic force of unknown origin. Electromagnetic power. Chimyun's mind suddenly recalled what Enwupiing had said. It was the words that appeared in their underground laboratory in Zwajing. If he remembered correctly, there should be an electromagnetic psychic in the composition of the psychotic entity. Although he remembered that the electromagnetic psychic was not strong, and the psychic power was not in this form, and it was different from the psychic effect that Enwupiing was using now. But since the nature is the same, the source of the electromagnetic psychic power on Enwupiing is probably that psychic. Since that person has become part of the psychotic entity, if you want to continue to obtain this power, the origin of chaos. Chimyun speculated on the most likely situation now. He immediately amplified his perception of Chen Ming. In the surging and chaotic psychic fluctuations, he detected the slight fluctuations of the infatuated spirit stone in the Underground Research Institute. His guess was correct. Enwupiing is a lunatic. He stuffed the source of chaos into his body to control it and used the spiritual energy in it for his own use. Chimyun felt a little nervous at this time, because even a psychic like him who had rich experience in using multiple spiritual powers at the same time did not dare to do this. If Enwupiing could not control it, he might be involved. As soon as this idea came into his mind, he was immediately forcibly erased. Thinking about something in a life and death battle will only make people closer to death, and his mental power was consumed crazily. Voiding is not a completely unlimited spiritual power. The high mental power consumption of using it means that Chimyun cannot hide in voiding for a lifetime. When Chimyun finally couldn't help but stop voiding, several suspended ice spears appeared behind him. The terrifying power of the magnetic field dragged Chen Ming away from the spot. When he appeared again, Chimyun really felt the threat of death. But just before Chen Ming's fist hit, his body suddenly changed. His body gradually became transparent, becoming a half-real and half-virtual nature. It was this sudden change that allowed him to avoid the plasma and Chen Ming's violent punch under the power of the magnetic field. This is not virtualization. Virtualization does not have such external manifestations, but a nature that makes Chen Ming feel more familiar. It's like a ship spirit. His body has properties similar to a ship spirit. Under normal circumstances, only pure mental power can affect the existence of a ship spirit. Therefore, in Chimyun's current state, only pure mental power can hurt him, and if Chen Ming guessed correctly, the current mental power should cause fatal damage to Chimyun. But just when Chen Ming wanted to change the means of attack, his mental power had just gathered. Chimyun used the virtual spiritual energy again, and with the black fog and spiritualization, he completely disappeared from his perception. Even the biomagnetic field could not locate his existence. After entering the spiritualization, he seemed to have really disappeared. But Chen Ming knew that Chimyun must still be somewhere near him. Before Chen Ming had time to find Chimyun's trace, he suddenly received a message from his subordinate Yu Hui. The Stargate located in Kamo, one has just been successfully activated. According to the space fluctuation data released when the Stargate was activated, and Chen Ming's several external brains far outside the Empire instantly calculated the results. The other side of the Stargate is connected to the Bennu star field. Chen Ming immediately divided some of his attention to the fleet of Kamo 1. At this time, inside the galaxy, in the center of the giant Stargate device, in the illusory film, a huge fleet appeared. The leading flagship has reached the 10,000-meter level. It is a main battleship. If Chen Ming remembers correctly, the model of the main battleship that is passing through the Stargate. It is a fuel transport ship called Prometheus-class jointly developed by multiple governments. However, the appearance of this Prometheus is slightly different from what Chen Ming knows, and it seems to have undergone a lot of modifications. A large number of fuel storage tanks have been removed, and a considerable number of weapons of different models have been installed in these vacant gaps. And the most conspicuous thing on this Prometheus class is the giant cannon that is almost one-third of the length of the ship. If Chen Ming remembers correctly, the main weapon of Prometheus should be the Vulcan-class positron cannon, which belongs to energy weapons. But this cannon is obviously not an energy weapon. It should be a new cannon that fires live ammunition during the modification. No matter what it is. Since this battleship comes from the Bennu starfield, then this battleship and the fleet it leads cannot be heading towards the Empire, but belong to the fleet of Zwujing. If such a battleship is only active in the Bennu starfield, which should be completely controlled by Zwujing, there will be no problem. But since it came to the focus of the entire Empire, Kamo starfield, through the Stargate, the news that the battleship was used was naturally spread immediately by the spacecraft that were hurriedly fleeing around the galaxy. Chen Ming soon got the news from his boss again, which he learned at the first time. The appearance of this battleship gave all those who were still in Kamo, Lucy, and other galaxies who were taking action against Zwujing a choice. Either leave or face the threat brought by the battleship. At this time, Chen Ming could see through the external monitoring of the psychic-controlled Earth core furnace power tower that some psychics who were not too deeply affected by the greedy psychic fluctuations had retreated. They left the industrial zone, boarded the shuttle, and prepared to run away. But some people still chose to continue to come to him. It was not known whether they had not received the news or their greed had overcome their reason. These people could not put pressure on Chen Ming, but the upcoming situation of the main battleship did make him feel a sense of urgency. As long as the main battleship came out of the Stargate, it could jump immediately. And its first target for jumping was definitely here, the Lucy Galaxy, in the orbit above the Yunluo star. And the main battleship, even if it was just a main battleship that was supposed to belong to logistics, at least at present, it seemed to have the ability to destroy stars. Although it might not be able to directly blow up the planet, it would definitely be no problem to wash the entire surface of the planet. If this Prometheus came, the recipient underground might not be in trouble. But in Whooping, who was still on the surface, would definitely be in trouble. Can't delay any longer. Chen Ming knew that he had to speed up and deal with Chen Mian. But there was another question in his mind. Since Zwujing had taken out the battleship, what about the Fifth Legion? What about the Empire? What about the battleships on their side? He could only ask this question in his mind. After the president went to work on something, he couldn't ask anyone about this question. But there was good news. At least for now, it seemed that Chen Mian, who was blocking his actions, couldn't beat him. Since Chen Mian was hiding now, Chen Ming didn't need to keep entangled with Chen Mian. His target was not Chen Mian. It was the recipient underground. He was the attacker. It was just that Chen Ming was worried that if he went underground against Chen Mian's attack, he might be attacked by two psychics at the same time. But since Chen Mian has used such psychic power, in terms of combat power, apart from his overly strong survivability and slightly more variable psychic power, there is no ability that can kill him. Then Chen Ming has nothing to worry about, and he goes down directly to find the recipient. It forced Chen Mian to fight him head-on and not give him a chance to delay. Chen Ming adjusted his posture in the air. Both fists were covered with a plasma glow, and rushed directly to the underground of the power supply tower that had collapsed a lot. The ground collapsed, the building collapsed, and Chen Ming instantly connected to the underground and penetrated dozens of floors. The psychic fluctuations from the recipient have become more and more obvious. And the psychic fluctuations of Chen Mian that had just disappeared also appeared in his perception again. Chen Mian was indeed anxious. Although Chen Mian, who appeared in Chen Ming's perception at this time, exposed his existence, he was still on the edge of being able to save his life, so he did not rush forward. Chen Ming quickly realized the reason. That is, Chen Mian's current state is very bad, very bad. After recovering from the spirit body to the normal human form, he looked very weak. Originally, Chen Mian would definitely not be able to avoid the punch that was enough to kill him, but just when the punch was about to hit, he suddenly entered the spirit body without any signs. Thinking about what just happened, Chen Ming felt that it should be the spirit body that helped him save his life, but also caused some damage to him, causing his weakness. But Chen Mian obviously couldn't watch Chen Ming continue to go underground, so he could only force himself to appear, hoping to distract some of Chen Ming's attention. Chen Ming's guess was not wrong. What happened to Chen Mian was indeed as he thought. At this time, Chen Ming was very nervous and panicked even though he was hiding in a safe place far away. Physical weakness is not a big deal. The main reason is that the intensity of his mental power and psychic fluctuations are much weaker than before. The source, of course, is the spiritual body. The spiritual body, like other psychic powers used by Chen Ming, is obtained from other people. However, this psychic power is different from the psychic powers used by Chen Ming. This is a psychic that Chen Ming tried his best to kill when he first knew that such psychic power existed. And he used the spiritual nerve in the brain of the psychic to completely seize it, instead of using psychic fluctuations to copy it. It can almost be said that it is a psychic power that completely belongs to Chen Ming. At the same time, relying on this spiritual nerve, Chen Ming has also turned this psychic power into a psychic power that is independent of his use of psychic power restrictions. Its effect is also obvious. That is, at the moment when the psychic is close to death, it will transform itself into a pure spiritual body to avoid the enemy's fatal attack. It is indeed similar to the ship's spirit. Under normal circumstances, only pure mental attacks can hurt him. Only the psychic that Chen Ming caught before was an exception. After all, the effect of this guy's psychic power was to use mental power to condense purely to a high degree close to materialization, and then attack or defend. If Chen Ming became a spirit in front of this psychic, then Chen Ming might die directly. However, the ability of the psychic could not force Chen Ming to use this state. Such a psychic power that can almost be said to be top-notch and can save a life in front of most people is of course very precious. But of course, there are also its limitations, very big limitations. The psychic power of all psychics is transformed from mental power as the root. In other words, all psychics actually have more or less mastered the means of using mental power to attack, unless they are those who have just become psychics. This also means that all psychics, unless they are those who fight Chen Ming for the first time and do not know this ability, as long as Chen Ming is beaten into this state, using mental power to attack immediately will actually be nothing more than a little more mental power consumption. Chen Ming will not have any chance of survival. Secondly, there is a limit on the number of times it can be used. This psychic can't be said to be a psychic that can only be triggered once in a lifetime, but at least it is a psychic effect that requires more than half a year of recuperation after being triggered once before it can be completely restored. After all, this is a psychic that transforms a person's body into a mental state, and then restores it from a mental state to a human form. After being triggered, a large amount of mental power is consumed in the process of transformation, and any psychic will lose a considerable degree of combat ability. This is the reason for Chen Ming's current state, and it is also the reason why he hides far away and dares not approach at all. If possible, he even wants to leave here now and find a safe place to recuperate. But he can't. He must appear. He must go up. However, Chen Ming continued to use the plasma chain explosion to go deeper underground and didn't care about Chen Ming next to him at all. Anyway, the same thing is that he is the attacker. Chen Ming had no ability to threaten him before, and now he is so weak after becoming a spirit body. If he pays attention to Chen Ming, the main battleship will be on top of his head. Chen Ming punched the underground structure of the Earth core furnace power tower with a fist wrapped in a large amount of plasma. The internal structure of this giant building really made him see the greatness of human technology. At least if he continued to demolish it purely by the means he was currently using, it would take some time. Chen Ming finally couldn't help it. Even if he took the risk, he once again appeared in a very dangerous position close to Chen Ming. Just above Chen Ming's head, there was a half of the floor that he had not destroyed. "You really dare to come?" Chen Ming had never thought that Chen Ming would dare to take the risk to enter the range where he could attack at any time. He changed direction and stopped attacking the floor of the energy tower and turned to Chen Ming. The dual magnetic field power of psychic biomagnetic field and plasma control magnetic field was added to his body. The air waves brought by his gestures had a loud sound like thunder. A layer of plasma armor quietly appeared on Chen Ming's body. It constantly annihilated the air, eliminating the influence of resistance on Chen Ming's movements. The reaction force of the plasma reaction under his feet accelerated Chen Ming again. After collapsing another layer of the energy tower's building structure, he appeared in front of Chen Ming like lightning. Chen Ming was still struggling in vain. and the virtual psychic energy was activated, and the ice formed a shield wall in front of him. However, the ice that could at least withstand Chen Ming's punch before was destroyed in an instant. Only Chen Ming, who was in the virtual state, tried to transform into black mist to avoid follow-up tracking after discovering that his current ability could no longer harm Manhwa. But the weak black mist that he had just condensed was immediately blocked by the strong light of the highly concentrated plasma and the surging spiritual energy fluctuations from Chen Ming. He could no longer escape from Chen Ming's lock, and the moment he ran out of mental power and exited the virtual state was the death of Chen Ming. Chen Ming, who was in the virtual state, stood face to face with Chen Ming, without trying to make some futile escape moves. After all, any move would be interrupted in front of Chen Ming. This allowed Chen Ming to clearly see the complex expression on Chen Ming's face. The emotion represented by this expression was not only hostility and hatred towards his enemy, but also a hint of relaxation that should not appear at this moment. Chen Ming frowned slightly and said nothing more. He just silently felt the spiritual energy fluctuations and the rapid weakening of the strength of mental power from Chen Ming. Chen Ming is Chen Ming after all. His codename means that his expression is just a look. The key is to kill him first. As Chen Ming's mental power finally approached exhaustion, Chen Ming raised his fist flashing with plasma, leaned his body slightly, and accumulated strength to the extreme. But just before Chen Ming was about to end his virtual state and his punch was about to be thrown, an echo from deep underground that made people's consciousness seem to gradually sink sounded in Chen Ming's ears. This came from the power of the receiver. And this was not a means of subtly changing people like before, but a very aggressive means. Chen Ming's consciousness attached to Manhwa's body trembled subconsciously, and his posture of accumulating power suddenly stagnated. At the same time, he also felt that his body was suddenly shaking, and different cells were actually hurting each other. It was not the effect of the receiver's echo, but a brand new psychic fluctuation. Another psychic, Zhuojing's psychic, who was originally deep underground, joined the battle. Chen Ming suddenly seemed to wake up, seized the fleeting opportunity, and fled from Chen Ming, no longer waiting to die. Chen Ming no longer paid attention to Chen Ming, who was basically useless, and turned his eyes to the ground. A man in a cloak appeared there at some point. He was not the cloaked man that Chen Ming had seen before. The cloaked man before was the recipient. And this, Chen Ming's last bit of remaining mental power turned into black mist and barely appeared next to the new psychic. When he almost fell to the ground and was barely helped up, he couldn't help but say, "Zhan, what's wrong with you?" The psychic called Zhan by Chen Ming shook his head and said, "I'm no longer needed below. It's more important to stop the enemy." Looking at the dark monster floating in the air, he emphasized again, "We must stop him." As he said this, he raised his right hand, and the cloak he was wearing was also lifted up. At this moment, both Chen Ming and Chen Ming discovered for the first time that what was under the cloak was not a normal human arm, but a flesh and blood tentacle. Chen Ming's eyes flashed with fear, confusion, and relief for a moment. He lowered his head and closed his eyes. The flesh and blood tentacle further rested on Chen Ming's shoulder, as if it wanted to do something. No matter what the tentacle wanted to do, as long as it was what the enemy wanted to do, Chen Ming would never let it succeed. The plasma armor on Chen Ming's body flashed, and a straight colored line was drawn in the air, rushing straight towards Chen Ming and Zhan. However, Chen Ming had just shortened the distance between him and Chen Ming by half, and Zhan raised his left hand in his direction. Zhan's left hand was still a normal human arm, and his psychic energy fluctuations were seen surging in front of him. The air in front of Chen Ming, not just air, all the particles in front of him were vibrating violently enough to produce a terrifying high-temperature isolation layer. The particles here were vibrating wildly, so that Chen Ming couldn't even see what was happening below. Although this high temperature was only a match compared to the entropy cage that Hui had created before. But when Chen Ming rushed into the isolation layer where the particles were accelerating and used plasma to annihilate the particles, he found that his body was also vibrating, and all the cells and particles in his body were vibrating from the microscopic level. This vibration was still constantly causing internal injuries, causing Chen Ming's body to be close to collapse in a short period of time. This is the psychic effect of Zhan. While Zhan's one hand was blocking Chen Ming's actions, his other tentacle arm had already torn open the skin and tissue on Chen Yin's back neck. While the wound was sealed with the flesh and blood on the tentacles also extended into Chen Yin's body. The psychic fluctuations on Chen Yin's body were recovering. He suddenly raised his head and looked at Zhen next to him with doubts in his eyes. But Zhen said nothing, just retracted the flesh and blood tentacle arm, indicating that Chen Yin should be ready to fight in Whooping. At this time, Chen Ming finally got rid of the influence of Zhan's resonant psychic effect. It's not that the vibration has no effect on him, but the speed of damage caused by this resonance after Chen Ming completely stimulated the psychic power of the Queen of Insects could not keep up with the speed of the Queen of Insects' psychic power to help Whooping's body recover. Chen Ming resisted the resonance and condensed a plasma spear between his palms. With the huge force of the magnetic field, he threw it out and rushed straight to the vital point on Zhen's forehead. Zhen's reaction was also quite fast. He raised his left hand and clenched it into a claw and swung it towards the plasma spear in the air. The vibration of the particles deviated the direction of the plasma spear, and it pierced into the wall next to it at an angle, and a series of continuous explosions occurred in the wall. Until now, the structure of the Earth core furnace power tower finally had problems. Some building fragments began to fall from the top to where Chen Ming was now. But this didn't affect anything anymore. The three psychics present were not worried about such falling objects at all. After throwing the plasma spear again, Chen Ming finally rushed out of the range of the resonance area. Just as he was about to attack Xin and Qinmian, Zhan was wrapped in Qinmian's black fog and disappeared on the spot. Chen Ming had not yet understood where Qinmian, whose mental power had just been completely exhausted, got the mental power to take Xin away. Zhen had already used the resonance of his spiritual energy to build an isolation layer of countless particles moving at high speed around Chen Ming, blurring the environment around Whooping and making it impossible to perceive it through vision and hearing. And Qinmian once again entered the virtual state, even with Zhan in the virtual state. Chen Ming's spiritual perception was invalid again. The purpose of the two of them was very clear, that is, to drag him hard. Chen Ming stood there for a second and instantly came up with a suitable solution. The plasma armor on his body suddenly flashed a brighter light than before, and this light was still expanding and expanding, constantly reacting with the particles in the air and annihilating them, until the surrounding space was close to an instantaneous vacuum, so that Zhan could not use the surrounding environment to interfere with him. However, Zhen immediately made another decisive choice. He directly collapsed part of the foundation of the Earth core furnace energy tower. A huge amount of building debris and the surrounding rocks and sand instantly buried the entire space, including Chen Ming. From the surface, the Earth core furnace energy tower, such a towering giant, tilted to one side as if a leg was broken. Those tilted parts directly filled the underground space that Chen Ming had penetrated all the way. The strength of the energy tower was verified here again. Even if the upper foundation structure was destroyed, even if a huge amount of building debris and sand fell into the underground of the energy tower, the energy tower still did not collapse. The deeper floors underground still insisted on not being damaged or destroyed. Qinmian took Zhan to the deeper underground of the Earth core furnace energy tower that was not damaged. Qinmian raised his head and looked at the top of his head, asking, "How long can this delay him?" Zhen gave an excellent answer, "I don't know." Qinmian had nothing to say, so he could only tell Zhan the information he had learned about Whooping. Whooping is at least a level 5 psychic. He must have some tricks up his sleeve. You must keep one more hand. It's best. Before he finished speaking, the top of the layer they were on was destroyed, and Chen Ming appeared beside them in an instant with the glow of plasma and the electric light of magnetic field power. As his fist hit a piece of black fog again, he asked, "Level 5? Qinmian, what is a level 5 psychic?" When Chen Ming just broke out of the buried rock layer, he happened to hear Qinmian talking about this with Zhan, so he asked this question by the way. Qinmian appeared at a safe distance with Zhan and said to Chen Ming, "Stop, and I'll tell you." "That won't do." Level 5 psychics should be the standard for determining the ability level of psychics. Chen Ming has plenty of people to ask, and he doesn't need to ask. Levels are just paper data. Yin Xiong must be at the same level as the boss, and he died in his hands. In Chen Ming's eyes, psychics can only be divided into 4 types: stronger than him, weaker than him, those he can beat, and those he can't beat. Chen Ming feels that the specific strength of Qianyan and Zhan should be similar to Enwupiing, but the abilities of the two of them are obviously in the category that he can beat. Of course, he can beat them, but at this time he has no time to waste on the two of them. Because at this moment, Chen Ming's Yuhui fleet, which stayed at the edge of the Lucy galaxy, has detected the huge scale of the jump fluctuations inside the galaxy. The Prometheus class of Zhuojing is here. The fleets of the 5th Legion or other forces that originally stayed inside or at the edge of the galaxy also chose to flee a short while before the psychic fluctuations appeared. A cruiser has no chance of winning against a battleship, and staying there will only increase casualties. Even if the battleship was originally designed to transport fuel, even if it has not undergone any kind of modification, such a battleship cannot be said to be hostile to a cruiser. Therefore, the Prometheus class can easily reach the sky above Yunluo star, and the situation outside is not optimistic. And at the moment when Prometheus and the fleet following it arrived by leaps and bounds, they have already begun to clear the entire galaxy. Even when Chen Ming continued to bomb down, Prometheus had successfully occupied the planet's airspace, blocked all outsiders from entering. If you want to block the recipient and block Zhuojing, it seems that you can only rely on internal battles. So Chen Ming did not continue to work hard to track the two people, turned around and accumulated all his abilities on his fists again, and continued to bombard the ground, until he found the recipient underground. But the depth of the Earth core furnace power tower is really not something that can be reached in a short time, because now on the surface, the continuous explosions that could be heard before are gradually becoming low, leaving only a subtle vibration that is almost imperceptible. And Chen Ming feels that he is still quite far away from the recipient. At this moment, in the management center of the surface industrial zone. After the management director of the industrial zone found that the explosions outside were gradually getting smaller, he subconsciously asked, "Is it over?" Although the core area of the industrial zone was very noisy, many people knew that something bad was happening in the industrial zone. But the management and security forces here had already received orders from the planetary government not to care about anything and to pretend that they didn't see any movement. And all the people working here were ordered to stay at home and wait for follow-up instructions. When facing the battle between psychics, there is really not much they can do. However, he had just finished speaking. The roar of the explosion sounded again, and suddenly there was another more violent vibration underground. He immediately held his head and pushed into the corner, saying no more. And underground in the energy supply tower, the violent explosion that was loud enough to be heard on the ground was obviously caused by Chen Ming. Because just when he continued to go deeper underground, Qianyan and Zhan were still trying their best to interfere with him. If they could interfere, it meant that the power of the explosion was not enough to threaten them, so he continued to increase the power of the explosion. Anyway, for the number of energy crystals that can be produced by a worm nest that has occupied the entire planet, the number of energy crystals consumed by a single individual is not even a drop in the bucket, so there is no worry about loss. As long as the power of the explosion is not so strong that it can accidentally hurt the people above. In addition, the purpose of Qianyan and Zhan has never changed, which is to delay time hard, and to delay for a second. So Chen Ming will never do as they wish. Zhan and Qianyan can certainly see Chen Ming's plan. But their fighting ability is indeed no match for the most advanced technology that Chen Ming and the Queen of Insects have mastered, which is a combination of their psychic powers. Jin turned to Qianyan beside him and said, "There is only one way left. Send me to him." Qianyan knew what would happen if he did this without thinking. "You will die. But he may also die. We can only take a gamble. At least let me go first. Your psychic power is the last insurance." These 3 short sentences were spoken. Qianyan nodded slightly and stretched out his hand to press on Zhan's shoulder. In the gap between the 2 plasma explosions of Chen Ming's fist, the black mist brought Zhan to Chen Ming. Chen Ming didn't expect Zhen to dare to run to this position. But it was okay. He immediately changed the direction of his next punch and aimed at Zhen's chest. Zhen also put his left hand in front of Enwupieng's chest and transformed all his mental power into spiritual energy fluctuations with his face close to Enwupieng's face, and it was faster than Enwupieng's fist. Resonance. The power of resonance rolled in Enwupieng's body, and almost all of his internal organs were smashed to pieces under Zhen's blow that abandoned everything. Enwupieng's body functions were rapidly losing, and the breath of life seemed to be fading. He paused in place. The glow of the plasma gradually disappeared, and before he could swing his fist, he suddenly coughed up a large mouthful of gray-green blood mixed with internal organs. But at least Enwupieng finally seized the opportunity in front of him as if he had a last gasp. At the moment when Chen Ming had no time to take Zhen away, he grabbed Zhen's neck with both hands and directly twisted his spine. Zhen's body was violently torn into two pieces and thrown out like a dying beast. But what Enwupieng threw out were not internal organs, but pieces of flesh and blood that were still moving. After throwing out Zhen's body, Enwupieng suddenly knelt on the ground and fell slowly. He kept making sounds of blood stuck in his throat and trying to breathe. But under Zhen's last attack, Enwupieng's lungs were obviously torn apart, and breathing had become a luxury. Life seemed to be leaving Enwupieng. Chen Ming, who was quite a distance away from Enwupieng, looked at Enwupieng coldly, and his face was no longer half of the seemingly sincere smile he usually showed. Because the blood and flesh spilled from Zhen's body were just the product of the infection of the dimension. They were still alive, but Zhen was indeed dead. Chen Ming and Zhen had been friends for many years. It was difficult for him not to have emotional fluctuations when someone he knew died next to him. Even if Enwupieng next to him looked like he was about to be buried with Zhen, he couldn't relieve the depression in his heart. What's more, he didn't think that Enwupieng was really going to die. He knew very well how strong Enwupieng's body recovery ability was, and he also knew how cruel Enwupieng was to Zhuo Jing. And up to now, Enwupieng still hadn't used the ability to burn a large piece of land on the planetary level into glass. If he were Enwupieng, he would at least use this ability before he died. Of course, Chen Ming actively controlled Enwupieng to fall to the ground, and he even deliberately suppressed the recovery ability given by the Queen's spiritual energy so as to prevent his injuries from recovering too quickly and he pretending to be dead. But to be honest, the huge amount of damage caused to Enwupieng's body by the shock that was released just now was really scary. At least most of Enwupieng's internal organs were really shattered. But the Zerg core was still preserved, so Enwupieng couldn't die. The reason why he knelt on the ground and pretended to be dead after spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood and internal organ fragments was to catch Chen Ming's fish and wait for Chen Ming to approach to confirm that he was dead and suddenly jump up. Another thing is that just when Enwupieng was knocked down, the president who had gone out to do something suddenly came back and called Chen Ming. On the phone, the president briefly talked about Kaimo's situation. He said that the Empire had thoroughly understood Kaimo's situation and classified all the actions of creating chaos and attacking the 5th Legion as rebellion. And they also knew about the situation in the Binyu starfield and had ordered the urgent dispatch of the 14th Legion's main battleship to fight against it. But when he said these words that sounded fine, the president's tone was very problematic. Obviously, this should be a good thing. But after hearing Chen Ming's question, the president said with a very disappointed look, "Whether it is a good thing or not depends on what happens later." Then he asked Chen Ming's fleet to keep as far away from the several star systems where the incident occurred as possible, and then hung up the phone. From what the president said, Chen Ming guessed that the president should have gone to a meeting with the imperial government and the 5th Legion. I'm afraid some bad decisions were passed at the meeting, so the president is like this. As soon as he saw the possibility of such a situation, Chen Ming had some bad premonitions in his heart. So he also paid a little more attention to his fleet. Of course, he still had to deal with Chen Ming's problems. Unfortunately, Chen Ming was not fooled. Even though Chen Ming controlled Enwupieng to fall to the ground without any movement, he still kept a safe distance. At the same time, 3 ice cones strong enough to pierce Enwupieng's shell appeared behind Chen Ming and aimed at Enwupieng. The 3 ice spears pierced Enwupieng's left chest, brain, and cervical spine in an instant. In this process, Whooping did not move at all. Even the spiritual energy fluctuations had dissipated, and it looked no different from being dead. But Chen still did not give up the test. A large number of ice spears gathered around him, as if they would tear Whooping to pieces before they would stop. Then Chen Ming would not indulge him, and he was too lazy to waste time. He just pretended to be dead just to answer a phone call and fish. If Chen didn't fall for it, he would continue to go underground. The danger he sensed from underground had been getting more and more serious since just now, and the recipient was probably not far from completing what he was going to do. Whooping suddenly climbed up with 3 ice cones on his forehead, heart, and neck, and pulled out the 3 ice cones one by one and crushed them directly as if nothing had happened. He was surrounded by spiritual energy fluctuations, and all his injuries were recovering rapidly. "You are still alive." Chen voice attracted Chen Ming's attention, but Chen Ming just took a look, turned around and condensed plasma on his fist again. Whooping's disregard made Chen feel uncomfortable, as if a thorn was stuck in his heart. It was like trying desperately to attract someone's attention, but that person only focused on his own affairs. Chen was now at a loss. After being beaten half to death by Chen Ming before, and losing the opportunity to cooperate with Zhen, he could no longer threaten Whooping with those means. He suddenly sighed and took out a whole handful of heart-gathering spirit beads from his pocket. He couldn't hold it firmly with one hand, and many of them fell to the ground. And these heart-gathering spirit beads, whether in the palm of the hand or on the ground, all broke at the same time without any external force. The spiritual energy fluctuations inside the heart-gathering spirit beads that Chen had accumulated for an unknown period of time were all released. Enveloping him, Chen Ming had already turned his head after hearing the sound of glass beads falling to the ground. And when all these heart-gathering spirit beads were broken, Chen Ming already knew what the guy in front was going to do. He wanted to turn himself into a monster that only a psychic could become. He wanted to become a mind-wandering entity. "Madman," Chen Ming just commented. The psychic fluctuations on Chen body showed signs of chaos. Countless psychic fluctuations belonging to different psychics were entangled and struggling on his body, constantly competing with the psychic body in front of him for control of the body. Chen Ming felt that he might have to witness the whole process of a psychic becoming a mind-wandering entity. Chen face showed a painful look. The skin on the surface of his body was being torn. The psychic fluctuations had escaped his control and were forcibly entering his body and occupying his body. Even in this process, Chen injuries were enough to kill him more than a dozen times, but he still stayed alive. The flesh was torn, twisted, and deformed. Chen body had lost its human form and turned into a flesh ball with a diameter of only about half a meter, covered with thick blood vessels and dense nerves. Just when Chen Ming thought it was over, a layer of transparent liquid suddenly began to overflow from the surface of the meatball. This layer of liquid solidified rapidly when it came into contact with the air, and solidified layer by layer, completely wrapping the meatball in it, forming a huge, translucent spherical creature that could float in the air. From its appearance, it was not the same thing as the previous flesh and blood totem pole. Instead, it looked like a very beautiful eyeball without pupils. However, suddenly, the darkest place inside this spherical creature should be the place of the meatball. Organs that looked like esophagus extended from the inside to the outside and extended to the surface of the sphere. And the flesh and blood inside seemed to be stimulated, squeezed out of these esophagus, and covered the surface of the sphere. A raging stench immediately overwhelmed the surrounding environment. Even Chen Ming, who had personally created the grave pit and seen countless rotting corpses, could not stand the stench. And what was even more terrifying was, when Chen Ming smelled the stench, it seemed that the flesh and blood also appeared in his mouth. There was a disgusting taste that made people feel like chewing rotten flesh and blood in Whooping's mouth. And as Whooping's mouth moved, Chen Ming even had a numbing feeling of chewing these things with his own mouth. Even the body of the Zerg, even after experiencing so many consciousnesses, could not endure this disgusting feeling for a moment. Chen Ming could only be forced to cut off the olfactory nerves and taste nerves to completely block this feeling from consciousness. However, he did not have time to make any follow-up actions. The flesh and blood with a rotten smell completely covered the eyeball-shaped sphere. These flesh and blood did not continue to increase, but after a short period of calm, they suddenly formed different living faces. This is the thousand-faced psychic runaway entity. These faces suddenly opened their mouths at the same time, and the voices of countless people speaking at the same time rang in Whooping's ears. "I'm not crazy." The terrifying tremor was circling. Whooping's body was trembling subconsciously, and he couldn't stop it at all. God knows how much psychic energy there is in Chen Ming's crushed spiritual power and how much psychic energy there is related to sound. After the psychic effects of these psychics are superimposed together, Chen Ming has almost no way to make an effective resistance. He is not only physically unable to completely control Whooping. Even psychologically, he is also frightened by the fact that Chen Ming has become a mentally rampaging entity, but still has the reason to refute the word madman he just said. A mentally rampaging entity that can be controlled by reason is 100 times more difficult to deal with than an ordinary entity that only has instincts left. What a fucking monster. Chen Ming cursed, pierced Whooping's eardrum, and cut off the auditory nerve. The terrifying trembling voice that accompanied the speech was completely eliminated from his ears. However, on the sphere covered by countless faces, all the faces had pale, shriveled eyes like dead people, and suddenly looked at Whooping. A sharp pain that seemed to come from the soul suddenly appeared on Whooping's body. Even Chen Ming felt some of the pain indirectly. After the previous experience, this time Chen Ming immediately cut off the pain nerves in Whooping's body. However, this feeling did not disappear. This is not pain, but a nerve effect acting on the sense of touch. Chen Ming decisively continued to cut off the connection of the sensory nerves in various parts of the body, so that the sense of touch also disappeared. The 5 senses have cut off 4 senses under the influence, leaving only vision to allow Chen Ming to see Chen Ming's mental runaway entity. However, as Chen Ming expected, Chen Ming continued to use the psychic effect that was impossible to analyze to target Whooping. After the other 4 senses were cut off, Whooping's vision began to distort. Chen Ming had no idea how many kinds of spiritual energy were superimposed on him, and there was no way to effectively counter it. After being forced to cut off the 5 senses of external perception, Whooping stood still, as if he was waiting to die. However, Chen Ming, who was still barely conscious, knew that this was not the case. For a psychic, there is a 6th sense, the sense of spiritual energy. Chen Ming forcibly suppressed the other spiritual energy fluctuations in his body and mobilized the spiritual energy fluctuations from himself, as well as the spiritual energy fluctuations that every mental runaway entity should have. The effects of replication and devouring acted on Whooping's body at the same time, under the huge spiritual energy blessing of the mental runaway entity. The spiritual energy fluctuations on Whooping's body were being absorbed by Chen Ming, and they were even more exaggerated than the spiritual energy fluctuations absorbed before. Almost in the blink of an eye, Whooping had become weak. The psychic fluctuations belonging to Whooping appeared on the body of Chen Ming's psychotic entity. He was replicating, he was devouring, he was transforming Whooping's power into his own power. But at the moment when he completely devoured Whooping's psychic energy, on the huge sphere covered by human faces, all the faces suddenly showed a consistent expression of pain. A stream of gray-green blood was spit out from the mouths of all the faces. The entire sphere withered down. Chen Ming, whose 5 senses were completely blocked, did not see this scene, and he did not even move at this time, because he was waiting for the danger perception to be triggered so that he could respond through instinct. However, the danger did not come, but the sense of danger that was originally around him was gradually weakening. This sudden and strange situation forced Chen Ming to restore his visual nerves to confirm what happened even if he risked being targeted by Chen Ming's 5 senses. When he opened his eyes again, he found that Chen Ming was vomiting continuously. Judging from the gray-green blood on the ground, which was entangled within Whooping's spiritual energy fluctuations, Chen Ming was vomiting out the power that belonged to Whooping that he had just absorbed. And with the vomiting, the gray-green blood had basically been vomited out, but the countless faces of the sphere did not stop, but continued to vomit, vomiting bright red blood. What does it mean? Chen Ming was stunned by this scene. It's okay that his own spiritual energy is poisonous, but Enwhooping's spiritual energy is also poisonous? He had noticed that Enwhooping's spiritual energy was wrong several times before, and now he was more certain of this. What was going on? Chen Ming didn't understand. But it was true that Qianmian's mental runaway entity and the previous totem pole mental runaway entity gradually weakened after absorbing his spiritual energy fluctuations. This was the best opportunity to kill Qianmian. Chen Ming's eyes swept around, constantly obtaining accurate data about the surrounding environment. He planned to learn from the process of killing the mental runaway entity last time and come up with a big wave. Of course, he would not burn the glass directly like he did last time. His plan was based on the depth of the underground he was at and the structural strength of the surrounding energy towers, as well as the energy conversion efficiency of energy crystals and plasma, the effect of plasma annihilation, the support of crystallized rocks after plasma burning, etc. All these factors were added up. Calculate the plasma that can be produced with the most compressed energy without completely destroying the industrial area on the surface and the residential area around the industrial area. Use this most powerful plasma that he can produce under the restrictions of the rules to kill Qianmian. Although there are a lot of data, if you really want to calculate, you have to consider the effects of plasma and Qianmian's mind-running entity after they are released. Without knowing the distance of the psychic runaway entity, it is extremely difficult and unstable to calculate. However, with the help of several external brains, the process of calculating this equivalent is not bad. It is not even good, but Chen Ming just asked the question to Chao Fan and the others, and they directly sent the answer back without any extra nonsense. Chen Ming had nothing to say, and silently used psychic energy to transfer energy crystals from the Queen of Insects and continuously injected them into Enwhooping's body. At the same time, he was also using Enwhooping to continuously convert energy crystals into highly compressed plasma. The light of annihilation appeared in his palm again. However, just before Chen Ming completely condensed the plasma and threw it on Qianmian, he suddenly found that the psychic runaway entity formed by Qianmian suddenly stopped floating in the air, but fell from the air without any warning and hit the ground. The psychic runaway entity even made a popping sound of flesh and blood being crushed. Chen Ming only saw that the thousands of faces belonging to different people exposed outside suddenly began to rot and decay, and fell off the psychokinetic entity. It was as if they had rotted and died. The psychic effect of Qianmian blocking his perception also stopped acting on him as these faces decayed. Chen Ming stood where he was, not knowing whether to continue throwing the plasma in his palm. Qianmian turned into a psychokinetic entity and took the initiative to suppress him very actively and fiercely. As a result, he lost all 5 senses, and he could only rely on the 6th sense of the psychic to prepare for a fight with Qianmian. But he was still in the process of preparation. Qianmian, he died? Chen Ming was a little dumbfounded, and he couldn't understand what was going on at all. Instead, he took a few steps back in worry. But soon, only an ordinary-looking face in the corner remained on the psychokinetic entity. Although it was rotting, it still grew tenaciously on the psychokinetic entity. This should be the face that really belongs to Qianmian. Qianmian's lips moved, as if he wanted to say something. So Chen Ming quickly took back Enwhooping's auditory perception. Only the weak Qianmian uttered his last words intermittently. You are the real monster. As the voice fell, his last face also completely entered corruption and fell to the ground. Death has completely come. The huge, crystal-like research of the mind-running entity gradually melted and disappeared, turning into pure spiritual energy fluctuations. And a palm-sized crystal-like ball was left in the original place. The source of chaos. Really dead. After Chen Ming's careful consideration, Chen Ming felt that there was only one explanation now. That is, Qianmian absorbed Enwhooping's spiritual energy fluctuations, so he died. What is going on with Enwhooping's spiritual energy fluctuations? Even Chen Ming himself could not feel any problem at all, but for the psychotic entity, his His psychic energy was like some kind of terrible poison. Chen Ming stared at the corpse for a long time. He kept thinking about Chimyin's last words in his mind. Chimyin said that he was the monster. There must be something behind his words. But Chimyin was dead, so he had no idea what this sentence meant, which was a headache. Chen Ming thought for a long time and suddenly realized that he could not continue thinking. There were other things waiting for him to deal with. He picked up the crystal ball on the ground, which belonged to Chimyin's psychotic entity. This thing was the same as the chaos source of the totem pole, but there was a slight difference in appearance, and the psychic energy contained in it was a little different. But for some reason, the psychic energy fluctuations contained in this sphere were not like Chimyin's countless psychic energies, but only a few. It seems to be the psychic properties and effects that can truly survive the destruction of Chimyin's consciousness. There are 5 in total. Chimyin's basic ability imitation. Chimyin's favorite black mist. Chimyin's spiritualization to save his life. Chimyin's most effective means of attack and defense ice. And the previous one, which should be Chimyin's friend shock. These 5 psychics are all very useful psychics. Chen Ming opened his chest and revealed the Zerg core that served as the heart. Before, the last chaos source he obtained had already merged with the Zerg core. And this time, Chen Ming originally planned to put the new chaos source in another place to prevent the 2 chaos sources from contacting. But just when he was about to do so, his instinct suddenly urged him to merge the 2 chaos sources together. This seemingly dangerous behavior did not make Chen Ming feel any danger in his mind. So he just did it, and directly attached the crystal ball-shaped chaos source to Wuping's heart. At the moment when the heart and the chaos source merged, Chen Ming suddenly found that his consciousness fluctuated, and an extremely unfamiliar scene appeared in front of him. A backward star field, a backward star area, a backward city suburb on a backward galaxy. There is a row of dilapidated single-family buildings here. And Chimyin, who showed his appearance, stood in front of the small building. This seems to be a memory? Chen Ming just had this idea. I saw Qian at the door of the small building, suddenly turned his head, staring at Chen Ming for a while and said, "It's you? No wonder. This makes sense. Do you want to come in and sit down?" Chen Ming frowned and looked down. I found that he was not keeping in Wuping's appearance at this time, but showing his own appearance. This Chimyin saw his true appearance. But Chen Ming did not jump up immediately, because he could feel that the place he was experiencing was a space constructed by spiritual power. As long as he wanted, he could erase everything here at any time and leave this place safely. So he still planned to continue watching to see what this last remaining consciousness of Chimyin wanted to do.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.